All right, good morning, everybody. Today's going to be the space on nChain, open forum patents, talking about discussing the patents, what's nChain all about. We're going to do a little background history on it with Kurt Wuckert Jr., who's the Bitcoin historian. He's probably got the best perspective on what nChain's been all about and how they started and what happened. And we talked about it give a little background and preference and my perspective, and then we'll go into into some potential ideas for nChain and the patents and solutions and how to make the ecosystem better. So, but in my perspective, as we kind of get started on it, is nChain. We learned a lot about it from the book by Mark Eglinton, which is the Satoshi book about Craig Wright, and he talks about in there about how the original story from 2015 when Matthews and Ayer and Craig Wright all get together up there in Canada, and they're driving down to the offices of the attorney there in Ottawa, Canada. I think it's of McGregor. They're taking a taxi cab up to see McGregor, and there they are in McGregor's office, a little taxi. And I was always wondering who's sitting shotgun, which one of those big guys is sitting shotgun. So they're in there, and they take they get inside, and then they have a Skype meeting with McGregor and then his staff in the office about the patents. And they kind of, initially discuss. He was running a patent office at that time about blockchain technology. So they ended up striking a deal with him for the rights of Satoshi Nakamoto's life and biography. So that ended up happening. They went to Australia. They found that Dr. Wright had one of those big supercomputers there. That's a new fact I didn't realize. That he talked about it on a show around that time. And he had a supercomputer, and everyone debunked him, said debunked, it's not possible. And now it's come out that he actually did have that supercomputer there in his office in Australia. So he had one of it was only a handful of those supercomputers in the world, but he had one. So that happened, and the patent deal kind of struck, and McGregor came into the office and found that mysterious paper that would have proved the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto. Ended up. My conclusion is that McGregor grabbed that, swiped it, put in a safe somewhere, and that we'll end up seeing that on eBay at some time in the future to some anonymous seller, i.e. McGregor, and that'll be the likelihood. And the rest has started to become history. So then nChain ended up coming together and striking a deal with those guys, and now nChain is this massive entity that is, they've got offices in Switzerland, and basically they control. I would say they have a lot of intellectual property over the Bitcoin and blockchain space. And intellectual property is important because property rights are important, especially in the United States, where the First Amendment, the right to own property, the right to work is fundamental. And people who go against property rights, intellectual property and patents, they end up in litigation. So it's patent litigation is one of the most expensive, and also one of the effective types of litigation in the United States under Title 35. So a lot of people go out and do that type of litigation, make a lot of money. And that's where I see this going, because at the right time, when the iron's hot and the opportunity's right, nChain's well-funded, well-backed by attorneys and litigators over there, and well ready to strike with lots of intellectual property. And whenever the time's right and they feel the opportunity's right, if somebody wants to step on any of their intellectual property or they see that, I wouldn't doubt in a second they're going to see a cease and desist going out saying immediately, remove your property or cancel your project or pay us royalties or whatever the deal they strike. Otherwise, we'll see you in court. I would imagine that's going to start soon. They've been pretty quiet, but we definitely want to talk about the nChain intellectual property opening up patents. Joel wanted to talk about today. So all right, we'll do it on the inside. Let's get started on the space. A little preview introduction. I'll see you on the inside and at the top. This is Gavin. Yeah. All right. So let's do it. nChain, baby. What's cool about, nChain, what I've learned about it after reading the Mark Eglinton book, after, kind of really getting into it, it was one of the things that really sold me on how I just don't see any other way around these other blockchains surviving. And it was one of the many things. I mean, ultimately it was meeting with Xiaowei Liu and going down and seeing Jimmy Wynn back in 2022 and then going to Dubai. But around that time, before that time, I'd already found these patents. That's kind of what led me to meeting with Jimmy Wynn. And I remember maybe it was 21 or so. I found the patents at the end of 2021. I started looking, I'm like, wait a second, what is this? And I started seeing all these patents, and having like a background in law, I started reading the patents, and it's really complicated on a lot of the mechanical and mathematical things, which I can't understand, but I can understand the legal side of things. So I could see the enforcement and what's attempting to be said, and I could see that there's definitely a lot of them. And so I was like, man, there's some serious work and some serious money behind these patents. And they were going back to like 2016, even 2015. And I remember first when they were first getting filed, even seeing them around that time. I remember Craig reporting about when he used to do that old Twitter account, or was it Medium? He used to write articles on. But I started seeing him then, and then now it's once I met with those guys and met Jimmy. And Jimmy knew a lot about patents too. I think he was even I don't know if he was a patent attorney or not, but he definitely knew a lot about patents. So went down and met with him and with Xiaowei Liu, and met Xiaowei, and then went out to Dubai and started to really see that these guys are really. I feel like they've got a strong arm on the legal system over the blockchain and intellectual property and this Bitcoin system with these patents, and with the smart contract patent, with the there's just I'd have to go through all the ideas and inventions that they've done, but it seems like they're first to market on everything. And so one of the things that Joel wanted to bring up today on the space was ideas about open sourcing. But it looks like we got my man Kurt up here today. So Kurt, how you doing, bro? Good to see you.
Hey, I'm doing well, Gavin. Thanks for having me. How's my audio?
It's okay. It's okay. It's not.
Just okay.
Yeah, it's could be a little better.
Let me see.
There we go.
I'm using my premium microphone, but
There we go.
I'm not sure that it's
Maybe
connected well. Does it sound better?
Yeah, it sounds a little better. What do you think, Casey? Does that sound normal? How's my microphone sound? I'm using premium audio.
You sound great.
Okay.
Sound crystal clear.
Good. Nice. Yeah, you sound good. So one of the reasons I want to bring you up today was to go back into the history of nChain, and because it's such a mystery, with nChain. It's such a mystery, and when you get into this, though, you start to get into this space, and you're like, "What's this nChain all about?" And like, wow, these guys are kind of a big deal, but they're kind of quiet. And what's all, wait a second, patents, intellectual property. I mean, and then you start, Reggie Middleton started talking about him, and he started saying, hey, I keep running in nChain, keep citing my patents. And then he started looking into them. He's like, this nChain is kind of a big deal. What's going on? He started, they were citing his patents, so, I mean, can you tell us you've been in the space for so long, man. It's like that you've seen this all evolve. So you've seen it unfold as it was happening. And yeah, could you take us back in the day? I mean, what was it? 2015?
Sure.
2015.
So yeah, let's start. So nChain as it currently exists is like the third iteration of a Bitcoin focused, or actually a payments focused company. So it started in Vancouver, a guy named McGregor, who, if you've read like the Satoshi Affair and these kind of things, you've got Mr. McGregor, who was basically wanted to create a payments company to disrupt like the kind of companies that we now think of as like PayPal and Venmo, but this is going back, like 12 years or so now. So it was a lot less of a sophisticated market, and it was a really good idea. A lot of his core ideas were very good. He was good at raising capital, and got himself sort of ingratiated into the Bitcoin economy, realizing Bitcoin was a pretty good tool for such things, or at least that it could be. And so he wanted to do the research and development necessary to develop that idea and see, is there something here, or is Bitcoin just a meme? And so that kind of led him to, guys like Calvin, who also has a long history in the payment space. A lot of people don't realize Calvin actually has some intellectual property that he is likely still getting royalties from, that was sold to one of the companies that got absorbed by PayPal, I don't know, like 15 years ago as well. So Calvin helped develop a few key pieces in the global payments industry that is one of the reasons, I think it's one of the reasons he became a multi-millionaire. So he's well known to have brought high-speed internet to Western Canada and these things, but it's not as well known that he was a pretty key player in the progressive and disruptive payment space going back into the early 2000s. Um, so he and McGregor got connected, and they sort of retooled McGregor's initial brand, which I believe was called nCrypt, if I recall. They formed nTrust, and then nTrust eventually evolved into nChain. But they're sort of a progression on ideas where the focus became more and more on Bitcoin related payments infrastructure, data integrity solutions, and those kind of things. Now, obviously, the company was severely sidetracked by the initial Bitcoin Civil War stuff, the Bitcoin Cash split. Part of the reason is that SegWit actually makes a lot of their research and development, their technology. It kind of breaks a good chunk of the technology that had been developed up until that point. And then the same thing with BSV. So I think it's pretty funny when people are like, "Oh, well, this is obvious. nChain's plan has obviously been to, create BSV and give Craig Satoshi's coins on BSV, and that's like the whole goal." When in reality, the people at nChain and the people in sort of the broader empire surrounding these things have been super irritated. Like, they opposed the Bitcoin Cash split and they opposed the BSV split. Like, both things were huge setbacks to their long-term roadmap because they really just wanted to use Bitcoin as an underlying technology to solve a bunch of other problems in the payment and data integrity space. And so the history there, it definitely gets a little murky because the stuff with Craig also was a huge sidetrack, which again is why I think it's really funny that people talk about like, well, they obviously really wanted to out Craig and these kind of things. That the whole thing is a PR stunt, right? The notion that nChain and that whole sort of group is really just about putting up smoke and mirrors around Craig. I just find fascinating because in reality, they were super irritated about the forks, and they were super irritated about the fact that Craig's like Satoshi identity related stuff turned into the conversation, that all that leaked, because all of those things negatively impacted investors. It negatively impacted the early equity holders, and it negatively impacted the roadmap of all these things that they really wanted to focus on. And what they really wanted to focus on was intellectual property related to like reducing the friction of payments and increasing the integrity of data globally using a distributed network. And they wanted to use Bitcoin, but then it's turned into all these other things. And I think that's partially why nChain is like, you get criticized for being really disorganized and kind of having a lot of disarray about the way that they function and those kind of things. And it's because they've been forced to pivot. Like, these were not planned pivot. Like, these were not things that anybody wanted to happen, but they were forced to pivot based on sort of these outside circumstances. And it's, I don't know, like maybe it's just a bunch of unfortunate things in a row for them, or maybe, maybe it is some kind of, corporate espionage kind of thing. I think it's a little bit of that, but I think it's just the fact that like Bitcoin really is just such an immature and unsophisticated economy that a good chunk of it was inevitable. And then I think once people started to realize what nChain is actually up to, then it became a little bit like, you know what, we need to hold this back. Like, Bitcoin is really valuable as this thing that does nothing but absorb fiat capital. And once you get into the trillions in market cap on stuff like that, obviously everybody's incentives keep getting more and more misaligned, such that it just makes sense to do nothing. And doing anything like investing in business becomes an opportunity cost, like almost a pure opportunity cost with very little potential upside. So it's just now it's a weird baby. Like, the whole thing is a little bit in limbo. Like, what actually makes sense? What is the right way forward? And that's something I have zero insight on. I should also be clear, I don't have any like inside view on nChain. All of this stuff that I'm talking about is public. It's information you could read in any number of places. But Yeah. So, as for what happens going forward, I have no idea. You'd have to get somebody. I don't even know who the PR or media person is at nChain, so I don't even know who to recommend. But that's what it looks like as I see it, based on the public information.
So back in the so you give me a little bit of different perspective here. So it sounds like that the way I understand it is that McGregor, before it was nChain, he was the one who was bullish and he wanted to get the publicity out of the Satoshi reveal for his company nCrypt. That's the way I seem to understand it. And then
Yeah.
is that correct?
So here's what happened. Like, when Craig got outed in 2015, it was really problematic, and you can read the emails from among Craig and Calvin and Robert. McGregor's first name is Rob. So you can read the emails among those guys, and they're in an absolute panic, because it's like, okay, how do we get in front of this? This is going to really tick off, our financiers and all this stuff. Like, this isn't, like, the timing is bad and all this, So you can see their palpable irritation isn't even the word. Like, it really is borderline panic about what to do, because it's just super inconvenient when you're trying to, like, hey, we're already doing something really disruptive. Like, we don't need social drama and all this other stuff surrounding it. Like, asking people in 2014 and 15 for money on a multi-billion-dollar Bitcoin startup was, it just hadn't happened. I mean, even companies like Blockstream and stuff were barely out of the cradle, and these kind of things. There just wasn't money going around for these kinds of businesses at the time. And so, but when it happened, once it was out, this is where the schism kind of happened with Robert. Is Rob is like, okay, this has been my baby for a few years. Now it's been kind of forced out of stealth mode and all of these things. And so Rob really got into the idea of, okay, so now what we need to do is, now we need to start to market the Satoshi thing. Now the way to raise money is likely, okay, Craig Satoshi, like, we're going to do all these things. And that very clearly was not the way that Craig wanted to handle it. And so that's where that schism started. And which ultimately led to Robert, being forced out, bought out. I actually don't know the details of how their relationship
So
ended, or if he has any equity or anything anymore. Like, nChain is a private corporation, so I don't know. But ultimately, it was, an unceremonious exit for Robert at that point. And then it's really been in a sort of reorganization pattern ever since, because it was supposed to be focused on all of this commercially applicable stuff, and then it had to pivot hard to deal with all of this, like, Craig related drama, which frankly has lasted, I don't know, it ended up lasting about 8 years, where, while Craig is doing all this other work and working on these patents and other IP and stuff, there's also just this looming drama that exists around it. And, obviously, looming drama about one of your key people is not good for business. And so that's kind of where things are at.
it sounds like, okay, so the way you're actually explaining it is they had come together, like Calvin Ayre, Matthews, and I want to talk about Matthews as well in a minute. Matthews and then Craig and then also McGregor came together, and they
Mhm.
were moving forward with their plan about with nCrypt, or maybe coming together with nChain. And then all of a sudden the whole Wired and Gizmodo thing happened. Is that right? Or was the Wired Gizmodo before they got together?
No, they had all gotten together by that point. So Matthews, but pretty freshly. Like, they were not, like, these were not people that had a long relationship and knew each other really well. Like, there wasn't a ton of trust there yet. So Craig, Stefan was the key to Craig and Calvin. Stefan had long-term relationships with both of those gentlemen, but they did not know each other directly. So Calvin and Craig didn't know each other, as far as I'm aware, until 2014 or 15. But Craig and Stefan go back probably another 10, maybe even 15 years before that. And then similarly, between Stefan and Calvin, that they have a much older relationship than that too. They probably go back, both of them go back to the early 2000s, but Craig and Calvin's relationship is 2014, 15, which is right around when this Wired and Gizmodo stuff was going on, and right when nChain was also kind of on the platform looking to make a big launch, but they all kind of happened at the same time. And, and I think it kind of shows in the general disorganization of how things went during that era, and sort of the trajectory that they've been on since really sort of shows like, like pretty rough start right at that point.
Yeah, and this is actually right out of the Mark Eglinton book. He was just messaging me right now. The Satoshi, what is the title of the book again? Satoshi Review.
Hero Villain,
Hero
I think
Villain.
is
Hero
Mark's
Villain.
book. Yeah,
everybody check it out. It's a freaking fantastic mind bender read. I mean, I read it over the summer, and it was just like I couldn't put it down. It was so fun. It was so cool. Did you read it, Kurt?
I did. Yeah, it's and I it's fascinating. I actually gave a copy to a couple of family members who all are a little confused about what I do for a living, because I wear a lot of hats, and I said, well, here's one of the things I've been focused on. Like, this is the most confusing thing I've been focused on, anyways. Give this book a read. And so, like, now I think my mother-in-law, for example, is like, oh, okay, this is a very interesting story.
It personalizes this whole thing for sure. It makes it personal. Put names and faces behind it. And so
For sure.
Mark did a great job with that. So yeah. So what happened with Matthews? I mean, so Matthews was like an instrumental part with all of this. Now,
Yep.
I met Matthews in 2022 in Dubai, and I mean, from a distance, wow, I've been really impressed by him as from a distance, and I don't know him, but as an observer, he, incredibly impressed by him personally. That's just by outside. Now, since then, I've heard different perspectives of people more recently, which I'm not going to name, which were extremely not good. And
Sure.
reasons why he was removed or maybe left nChain that some things of his behavior. But what do you know about?
So I've only known Stefan very casually. Like, he's been on my show, for example, and I've talked to him in person probably like 2 or 3 times ever, which would be at or around old CoinGeek conferences and those kind of things. But he hasn't really attended any of that kind of stuff for at least the last year. And the last time I saw him at all, I think it was in Oslo in 2022 for the trial against the cat guy. And that was also brief. I saw him essentially as we were entering the courtroom, and handshake and, hey, how's it going, Stefan? This kind of thing. Like, you're sort of hi, what's up? 3-minute conversation. But we don't have a close relationship, so I don't know him personally hardly at all. And then professionally, I've dealt with him a little bit. Like, there was a time when he was I think he was the CEO or president or chairman or something of Tal. So when we were working with Gorilla Pool, or when Gorilla Pool would occasionally work alongside Tal on something, like if there had to be any kind of a communication or whatever, like we may exchange emails. And then same with anything. I don't do any business with nChain or anything, so I've never really worked with him in that capacity either. So my experience with him is pretty secondhand. And it's the same kind of thing, hearing rumors about, oh, okay, well, here's what's actually going on at nChain or whatever. And I've never even been to the nChain office. I wouldn't recognize it if I walked by it. So I can't speak to that necessarily. But in my experience, he's always just basically been a jovial guy. He's got a big personality and a big voice. Also quite a big gentleman. He's taller than me, and I'm quite tall. And so he fills the room and has a big personality. And his managerial style seems to be very like, I've given an order and therefore it shall be done. And he seems like the kind of guy that would not be afraid to yell at people if necessary, or those kind of things. But as for some of the accusatory drama about the malfeasances of nChain and stuff, I have no idea. The enemies of Craig and companies like nChain are pretty pretty wily folk. So any negativity that comes out about them also needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it other than Stefan's always just been cordially nice to me, but obviously he would be. He doesn't have a reason not to be. And but yeah, he's definitely a key player, but it's hard to know. Any of the rumor, like is Stefan, like all these rumors about is Stefan, actually, Stefan created Craig to scam Calvin and all these things. And I think that stuff is pretty silly. Like Stefan has his own money and did really well for himself. He was a career high level executive at big companies. It's not like he needed to be a career executive at a more volatile company for the sake of his wallet or anything. But yeah, so that's my take on Stefan.
Yeah. So one of the things that have come up more recently is the Edgar Hansen drama. And I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine like some of the people that are maybe like new, they missed all that, right? Like the whole
Sure.
Edgar Hansen didn't even, it was so brief and so fast, but it was like explosive, So do you want to just touch on that?
Yeah. So he's a weird one. Like the whole thing with him, I got really caught off guard. In fact, I think his introduction basically to the BSV ecosystem was on my show. And I was connected with him, somebody on Twitter. I don't remember who it was, but they were like, "Hey, this guy is outing information about what's his face, the attorney from
Oh yeah, the
the
attorney from
climate trial.
Florida. Oh man, yeah.
I forget his name now.
Yeah,
Oh man.
me too.
Anyways, who was a guy that I knew. I spent a month and a half in court listening to him litigate and this kind of thing. And actually, we had our own. Like I shook his hand. We talked a little bit. He went to Northwestern University in Chicago, which was a university that my family has some connection to. My great grandfather founded one of the colleges at Northwestern University, and so when he mentioned that's where he went to school, like turned out we knew some people in common and whatever. So I had a little bit of cordiality with him. Why can't I think of his name? I'm like super.
Kyle Roche.
Kyle Roche. That's it. Good job, Casey. Kyle Roche. Yeah. So, Kurt, we lost your audio there for a moment. We added.
I just posted the crypto.
Casey.
Sorry, I just posted the Crypto Leaks info about that whole thing in the nest.
Oh,
about the
nice.
Kyle Roche stuff.
Thank you. Let's add Kurt back up when he comes in. His audio failed. So I added up Brett C. Banfy and also Scott with 369 BSV up on the stage as well. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Doing great, Gavin. How are you?
Good, excellent, buddy. Good to see you. And Scott, good to see you as well. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm just wrapping Christmas presents, listening away. It's always great to hear Kurt give us the history of Bitcoin. So yeah, enjoying the space.
Okay, cool. Let's bring him back up here in a minute. And now we had this time in history, a period where this guy Edgar Hansen came into the space like a wily coyote, and he tore through it like a bull in a china shop, if I remember right. And so I remember at the Dubai conference that he was there, and he gave a speech, and it was very hard to understand the guy. He didn't speak very well. He wasn't super charismatic. I remember he had really super skinny legs, like very chicken legs, and kind of a funny top. And then it was hard to understand what he was saying. It wasn't there was no personal magnetism. When you're like a CEO or a main guy, you got to have this magnetism, like major personal magnetism. Just didn't feel it with him. He just didn't see it. He couldn't quite carry himself right. He dressed well and he looked okay, but then it all started unfolding. And apparently what happened, that I've read, is he actually went to an American Express Black Card event and met Craig, and there was testimony in the Copa trial about how Craig had been given GHB or roofies at that event. if I remember correctly. And then it was that event. Craig got blacked out drunk from this GHB at the event. And then he believed it was from Matthew or from Ager Hansen. And then Ager Hansen ended up being the CEO somehow, getting a white, red carpet treatment coming in. So, well, we lost
Yeah.
Kurt. Go
I
ahead,
can
Brett.
personally testify that Craig wouldn't get blackout on alcohol alone, because I've personally witnessed him drink an inordinate amount of that with basically not even the batting of an eye. So if something did happen, I can't personally attest to it. I wasn't there, but it's safe to say it wasn't from just alcohol, because that man is basically a horse.
And people have always asked me, remember Jack's always asked me, he said, well, who the heck let the fox in the hen house? And now this is pure speculation. Okay. But this is just my speculation on what happened, is that I could just imagine he drinks like a horse. He drinks like a fish. He can handle his alcohol. He gets blackout drunk at this event. I could just think of like the, I don't know, it's like old school, where he and Ager Hansen are having the time of his life. And they're like, yeah. And he makes these promises with Ager Hansen, or writes a note. I guarantee you'll be CEO. I will endorse you. Writes an endorsement letter to him. You're my man. And then Ager Hansen brings it off to Calvin and Matthews. Hey, I met Craig. I'm coming in for CEO. Craig's like, oh yeah, that guy from the event. Oh yeah, he's my man. Definitely. I can't imagine any other possible way that he got in with an endorsement to become CEO so fast. Kurt,
Hey, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you, man. We got you.
Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, so it is. It's such a bizarre thing with him, because his reputation is, I mean, his own words, that he's a corporate raider and all these things. And so the fact that everything went down the way that it went down, I don't think anybody should be shocked about. I think it's pretty on character for him. And if the accusations are true, like it's a fascinating thing. But yeah, the whole thing with him, I don't know what that vetting process looks like, but to me, I looked at it as like, okay, here's one more CEO at nChain, and he was the 5th or 6th one inside of maybe 7 years. So it's I don't know. I by that point, by the time he joined, I looked at it and said, you know what, I don't know, maybe he can sell, maybe he can commercialize something, maybe that's what he's actually good at, and whatever. But when it all fell apart, it was like, okay, like that's I guess to be expected. I think his own bio on his own website would have said like, yeah, I like to show up and gut companies and do what's best for me. Like he just has a very very cavalier attitude about what his role is in the universe. And so yeah, I don't know.
Corporate raider, I think that was his title.
Yeah, corporate raider. That's
Yeah.
what he would put on his name tag at the at the company mixer, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So he came in there, and then things absolutely blew up during the Copa trial, where he was he was managing Craig's case, and there was that famous picture on the internet where he's dressed up as a judge, and they're holding mock court, and that was completely against the rules, apparently. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I recall it vividly when it came up. Like that's first of all hysterical. I think the way that Craig said it, almost embarrassed about the fact he said something like Ager Hansen was wearing a wig and the whole thing, but which is just like, why would it look like that? Like, even if you're going to do such a thing, like why do the rigmarole of making it look like that? But yeah, I don't know. I honestly, at a certain point, you have to assume crazy people are going to be crazy, and I think that's a little bit what happened here. Is like, he's a super volatile guy, Ager Hansen, that is, and he's going up against, or up in the mix with guys like Craig. Craig is also a volatile guy, and then you got Stefan or whoever else is involved in this, and everybody's got a lot of big personality, and and a lot on the line. And I think a lot of the people at the same time, they're looking at it and saying like, man, nChain really just wanted to, compete with, I don't know, Venmo or PayPal or whatever when they're created, and now now the company is doing, doing all this other stuff. Like it's I don't know. The whole thing is one weird thing begets another weird thing, I guess.
Yeah. So he's managing the Copa case, and he's hiring the attorneys for Craig. Craig's taking a back seat apparently at the time, and has a lot of faith in Ager Hansen, I guess, at this point, because Ager Hansen was actually in charge of his expert witnesses, and so the expert witnesses that he had retained were they were basically just bozos. They weren't unqualified. So when the Matthews report came in and the Rosenthal report came in, Ager Hansen's expert witnesses just agreed with them all. They're like, yeah, that all makes sense.
Well, and it's funny because the small blocker types just want to be like, oh, these people are above reproach and whatever, they did a good job. And I remember posting that what's her face, Sarah, Dr. Sarah Meiklejohn. I don't want to just use her first name, but that she was at a dinner and sandwiched between Gregory Maxwell and Peter Todd. And they're like, oh, she's not allowed to have dinner. And it was like, well, she's allowed to do whatever she wants, but to act like she is uninfluenced by those things. And I always ask the question, like, okay, how would you feel if one of the key expert witnesses was seen smiling and sharing a drink with me at a dinner? Like, would somebody's relationship or proximity to me be a problem on the other side? And say, well, if they're friends with Kurt, they're obviously some tainted what would it be, like branch Craig Wrightian cult member or whatever,
disciple.
Right? And so and that's all fine. Like I here's the thing, like I would have a dinner with Greg Maxwell or Peter Todd. Like if they wanted to sit and chat, like I don't care. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. But to act like that is something of no influence, like that's a fallacy. Like that's something that I would discuss if I was asked to be a witness, an expert witness on anything related to blockchain. I would need to disclose the fact that, hey, you know what, I have a certain amount of proximity to characters like Craig Wright or Calvin Ayre, and and these kind of things. Like these are just the appropriate things to list on your caveats for your expertise. And on the flip side, they treated Zeming Gao as like, oh, he's this awful tainted like he's a person that can't be, like, he actually thinks Craig is Satoshi, and he has written articles about why Craig is Satoshi, and so his opinion needs to be thrown out with the rotten milk. and it's like, okay, maybe, but then also is not Dr. Meiklejohn's proximity to Gregory Maxwell, like, are those things not also relevant? And
Dr. Meiklejohn. Okay, so that's speculative. Let's just say if you're Copa, that's speculative. Okay, let's give Copa that one. But now we go over to Adam Back. He's the other expert. Remember?
Yeah.
He admitted on the stand he was actually with Copa. He was actually one of the parties.
Right.
And then you got the other guy from San Francisco. What was his name? That also with Copa. He was under Jack Dorsey's Square Company.
Yep.
So these are experts that are actually just under Copa. They're not even arm's length.
Well, and it's part of it is a problem of the fact that generally blockchain is an insular community, right? Like there's not a lot of, like, you basically can't be an expert on blockchain tech, business, or culture without being involved in those things, fundamentally, because it's just not that big. There's just not that many people. And so it's very different than like, hey, we need an expert on like, restaurant tech to come in and testify whether Chick-fil-A is poisoning their people. So they might bring in somebody from McDonald's and somebody from Wendy's and whatever to talk about like supply chain issues and and these kind of things. But in a world where, okay, hey, we need blockchain experts, and it's like, well, who are blockchain experts? Like these are people that 12 years ago were probably dark web malfeasance hey, I got into Bitcoin because I was trying to buy heroin on the Silk Road or something, and like, well, but now I'm a professional, and so there is a little bit of a problem with that, but I just think those things need to be disclosed. So and just not written off. Like there was even the same thing with Patrick Madden, where it was suggested that, hey, you know what, he likely has some, did anybody ask him about his holdings, his portfolio? Is he sitting on 50 Bitcoin from 10 years ago? Because that could be a relevant piece of information to how he hopes this case will go. But the suggestion that those things should be looked at was written off as like, oh, that's just so absurd. And it's like, no, it is not absurd at all for an IT or a cybersecurity expert who's been in this industry for 15 years, 20 years, whatever, to have some Bitcoin or to have had some proximity to people involved in Bitcoin. And like, that should be expected. It doesn't make Patrick Madden a bad person or incompetent or anything else, but it should be disclosed that, hey, yeah, no, I'm like, I think Ethereum is awesome, and I've got 3 BTC sitting in cold storage that I hope goes to the friggin' moon someday. And like, that's just reasonable stuff that needs to discuss. But I think because of the amount of general hatred for Craig, just everybody involved in the hierarchy is just like, well, we're just not going to look into it for you. And it's like, he's been so just lambasted at the level of his character that it's like, people are feel like they're being generous if they give him any human rights at this point.
Scott's got his hand up. I've got a question myself, but Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just also, I completely agree with Kurt, but it was also to do with, these, Master Rayburn, the original judge, was recused. He recused himself from the trial because he had worked with a law firm that had worked with nChain. So if that sort of level of cooperation, i.e., I've previously worked for a law firm that worked for nChain, is enough to recuse the judge, then these expert witnesses and Mellor's interaction is just ridiculous. It's not following the same standards for both parties.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to belabor the point, because I think, this stuff is the accusations between David Pierce and Judge Mellor, for example. Like, it's not unreasonable to say, hey, this should be looked into. And I don't think it's any bigger than that. I'm not saying they're definitely corrupt. I don't think it's very obvious that they're corrupt or anything like that. But the weird thing to me is that when it was suggested that, hey, David Pierce publicly said that not only did they speak during the time that Mellor was working on his written judgment, but they also maybe talked about the case. And I understand that he said it was, one passing sentence or 2 sentences about the whole thing. But like that is something that at the very least deserves to be taken a serious look at, because in this situation, I don't think anybody would be giving a grace to definitely on the other way. I had the judge summarily called a giant controlling call of big tax hampers. So this is an invasion of the British IP or whatever else. Like if it turned into like, wow, okay, like clearly something like that, let's here. Then in the process, it's just the normal behavior of someone who wants to take a look at it. Okay, for appeal, is there an angle that involves corruption? Can we break into the recognition issues with the experts and the judges on them? All these things, you look into those things. So none of that is unreasonable. And so that acts like it's unreasonable to look into whether or not there's an issue between Pierce and Mellor, maybe even just a slight impropriety. I'm not saying they're, meeting every night and have a secret handshake and, like to hug before bed every night, but it should be looked at as, hey, is there is there a little bit of impropriety? And if there is some impropriety, like what is the consequence of that? Like that's just a reasonable way for this to go.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things is actually it's not actual bias of the standards in the case that Meller even cited in his judgment, but it's just an appearance. And I want to just clarify what that means. It the appearance of bias means lack of disclosure. Now, Meller would have been off the hook, scot-free, no looking back, had he just said at trial, because he admitted this in his judgment, that, oh, I did see Tufte in the courtroom at trial, Mr. Pierce. And, I recognized him, kind of winked to him, but I didn't say anything at the time. Oops, I forgot. Oh, darn it. And that was his opportunity to say, oh, by the way, Craig, Tufte and I know each other from, way back. We have these dinners and we go to these Copa events together and we talk about Bitcoin a little bit. It's not a big deal, but I just want to let you know. I mean, if it isn't a big deal, but Craig might say, oh no, that's a big deal. I want you out, and Craig would have had the opportunity at that point,
Absolutely. And that's the thing. A fair trial means a fair trial. Like I have sat in lots and lots of courtrooms I've been in courtrooms covering trials, even outside of the blockchain space, several hundred days, and this includes jury trials and bench trials and all these other things. I've also been in business a long time myself. I've been in business myself since I was like 19 years old, and I'm pushing 40. And so I've been in my own litigation where these are just the things that you do. So everybody involved has a serious background check. Everybody needs to declare what any of their conflicts of interest could be, and no matter how small. Like, hey, yeah, my cousin is part of the neighborhood board with one of the people that's involved in the trial. Okay, well, you're not going to be involved. And I've seen it be that vague. Like, hey, we live in the same neighborhood. We bump into each other at the grocery store occasionally. I don't really know them, but we would recognize each other's faces. Okay, you're disqualified. And that's the end of it. It's not any, again, it's not conspiratorial. It becomes conspiratorial when you say, yeah, they know each other and they've talked about the subject of the trial in passing, sure. Yeah. But also it doesn't matter.
And also,
if it doesn't matter, it matters, also, you're a conspiracy theorist.
He sent him a bunch of books and everything, but he didn't read the books. But he's got them over there just in case.
Yeah,
it's only the Angelopoulos book about Bitcoin, mastering Bitcoin.
Right. Well, and here's the thing: is we're talking about, like, Bitcoin is not a cut and dry subject. Bitcoin is, for a lot of people, a religious subject. So it's the same kind of thing where, hey, if we're talking about some kind of trial where maybe there's a hate crime involved, like, it might be relevant what church you go to, or if you're involved in a controversial synagogue, or if you've gone to a mosque that, like, hey, we kind of know what's different about that mosque down the street, and like, that could be relevant information based on the nature of the trial. And so those are the kind of things where you need to just got to take an extra beat to make sure that you handle that appropriately.
It's so easy for Miller to have done that, and the judges he has no denial. Oh, I didn't know the law. He knows the law. If he sees a party that he knows, and especially in the courtroom. See, now we're past speculation now. I'm not saying, oh, well, maybe, but Judge Miller's already admitted in his judgment that he recognized Tufte in the courtroom at the trial. Yeah. All right. So therefore, if that was the case, and now he said, oh yeah, I do remember that we talked about Bitcoin. I do remember, but at the contempt scheduling hearing, remember, he said, no, we didn't talk about Bitcoin. No, we just,
yeah.
But now he's changed. Now he remembers talking about it after he's kind of refreshed his memory a little bit.
Well, and again, that doesn't even necessarily mean that there's any corruption.
Right.
Like, it just means that it deserves to be looked into. Like, you just need to check that kind of thing, because it could be a big problem. And the fact that it could be, and again, I don't understand the nuances of UK law and rights and these kind of things. But if that was the case in the US, like, the whole thing would have been a mistrial already. Like, it would be over, and it would say, hey, you know what? At some point we screwed up. It has been tainted in some way, and for the sake of human rights in a free nation, we're going to start over.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Right. That's exactly right. 100%. That's what would have happened. I wanted to go back into the into a little bit more of the nChain stuff as well in the history here as well. We'll go to the, speak questions here in just a moment. We got somebody who's got his hand up. Is it Bitcoin?
Yes.
That's Bitcoin Bill.
Yeah.
I recognize his handle.
Bitcoin Bill.
Hey, Kurt.
Hey,
It seems
Bill.
like a lot of the discussion so far has been about the prior cases, but the nChain patent library is very extensive, and it seems like they're not enforcing any of their patents. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. Let me touch on that here, and we'll go into actually. That's a really good point. Absolutely, but glad you brought that up. So one of the things I wanted to actually bring up a little more background was the Jimmy Wynn subject, because was Jimmy Wynn actually a CEO of nChain as well? Do you remember? Okay, I don't know. I lost you there.
I don't believe so. It
No.
looks like we might have lost Kurt, but yeah,
don't
no,
believe
Jimmy
so?
Wynn was.
Okay.
He's an IP attorney.
Okay, he wasn't the CEO of nChain. Okay, I thought for some reason I remember that at one point, but he was in charge of the BA. That's what it was, not the nChain. So, yeah, so there was another connection there, but apparently that's another angle. But yeah, the patent fortress of nChain is the, and we started out kind of the space, and I was giving my little premise there as we'll bring Kurt back up there. Casey, if you could be so kind, please, when he jumps in. I don't know if that's him or not, but when I started actually looking into this, I started seeing these nChain patents, and you go to the U.S. Patent Office in the United States and you start searching and you see nChain, and these are like really. The patents are not easy to just get awarded. They don't just pass them out for any just Mickey Mouse thing. You have to go through a long, extensive process, and then they review it and make sure that somebody else hasn't already discussed it, and then they grant the patent after like 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. There's a long process. It's not just willy-nilly, and this is all actually constitutional in the United States, where these patents come from. And they put it out in what's called the United States Code Title 35, and Title 35 litigation is some of the most high stakes litigation for business litigation, definitely in the US. And it is incredibly black and white. It's actually all on paper. Look, this is our property. You're infringing on our property. Get out of the way. And to answer your question, Bill, about why they haven't, well, I think that maybe the opportunity hasn't been right yet. I remember Craig talking about in the Dubai conference that he was saying, well, we'll just wait for the right opportunity until we go after Ethereum potentially. But is Ethereum going to be the one they're going to go after? Are they going to wait until like a BlackRock or a JP Morgan Chase coin comes out and actually have a real whale with a true registered agent? Because who's really in charge of Ethereum? It's kind of confusing, So I mean, it could be waiting for the right opportunity to pounce, but looks like we got Kurt back up.
Hey, I'm back. Yeah, and my I just switched web browsers because I'm using a lot of RAM in Safari for some reason. So now we're seeing if Chrome is better.
Yeah.
I think you make a really good point. Like the problem with litigation in the blockchain space is you have to set the precedent for who are the owners of that liability, which is actually something Craig has been trying to do. He looks at like the Bitcoin core developers and says, well, they're clear, like they did not form they didn't form an LLC or anything for their, clear partnership here, the way he sees it.
He's saying they're a common law partnership.
Yeah, they're common law partnership, which is a reasonable thing to do. A lot of people, accidentally start partnerships and things, because they have a hobby business together, and all of a sudden, if it turns into, now there's a lot of money in our common law partnership. Now, then they start suing each other. It's a very, very common occurrence.
But they have no protection they have no limited liability when they do that. There's no corporate protection.
Exactly.
No veil. So that's that's Craig's point. But yeah, to the idea of the patent litigation, like you're saying, is that who it really do you go after? And so I've heard a lot of speculation. Maybe the next JP Morgan coin will come out, or the next.
Sure.
Then you've got an actual entity.
That's what you need. You need an entity. So if a company issues something using your IP, then that's a very clear, litigant counterparty for your litigation. But in the case of even to sue Ethereum, like what does that mean? Do you sue the foundation? Do you sue the founders? Do you just sue Vitalik or Joe Lubin or whatever? Or or was, you know, your contract, do you sue whoever used the contract? So you might use a piece of IP to create a, you know, a smart token contract. So maybe you sue Uniswap, or, you know, so there's like whatever and that becomes very quickly a very muddy target, and that's wasteful with your own resources. So you kind of have to let it wait. Now the unfortunate part of letting it wait is now the market's worth like $4 trillion of money that's being made off of your intellectual property, and it's all disparate, it's all over the place. But at the same time, I don't know that there was a better strategy. I think trying to sue Vitalik 5 years ago or something would have also been similarly unfruitful, because it's just very unclear, and people's the legal understanding around blockchain technology is also still quite unsophisticated, but it was a lot worse even 5 years ago.
There's some, I think we've got some precedent now. Go ahead, Bill.
What about suing the exchanges like Coinbase that are marketing BTC as Bitcoin when it doesn't follow the white paper?
Well,
that would be huge.
That's happening now with the passing off case, but it's on hold until the contempt contempt thing is over. But you know, we do have some precedent now with Coinbase as well, because thanks to Reggie Middleton, that went up on appeal on a Coinbase case more recently, and that there is precedent. Go ahead, Kurt. You were. I cut you off.
No, absolutely. No, I'm just reinforcing your point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so we do have, we have that precedent there. You know, like I said, Bill, it looks like we got Jack Pitts up with us. We got Joel up with us as well. So feel free to chime in or raise your hands, fellas, and, you know, whatever you want to go. Hey, Joel, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you for getting my name right.
Joel, thank you to Miss Casey Nicole for that. She corrected me.
Thank you, Casey. I've just been happily listening along, and I will comment soon. I'm happy to give the floor over to John Pitts, who's up as well.
Yeah, John Pitts, the next CEO of nChain, you know, as we're joking around here. So, you know, we definitely want to talk about some of the ideas that you had as well, Joel. So let's table that for a minute regarding the nChain patent stuff, because hopefully this recording will get over to those guys in the ivory towers up there at nChain, and whoever's, you know, pulling the strings, that, you know, the mystery people that are actually in charge there, this giant thing that is really, you know, somebody's making calls on when they're going to litigate, when they're going to enforce patent rights. We just don't know who they are and what their decisions are. Go ahead, Bill. Joel, did you want to? Joel.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. On the patent things, I do want the message to definitely get up the food chain up to the top of nChain. And for Calvin to, because what I want, why I'm pushing out the narrative now, is I want the discussion to be had and for people to understand the merits of open source nChain patents. And to be clear, because there's been some confusion, it's not just giving them away for free, it's keeping the licensing rights and open sourcing them so everyone can see what they're doing and build on them. I mean, the patents are out there anyway, but people don't understand how to build on them. And also for other blockchains, we want to allow people to build on them and to be creative and innovate. Who's typing?
Who's the typer?
I'm guessing it's Pitts. Hey, Jack, mute your mic.
Oh, Jack, the keyboard warrior over there. He's
yeah, man. It's like 90 words a minute, they called him.
He keeps trying, but the space is rugging for him. Every time I add him as a speaker, it works for a few seconds. It doesn't let him speak. So
yeah, mine's been buggy too. I don't know if it's
okay. Yeah. So Joel, you were making a point, and we had some interruptions.
Sorry, I had to quiet my dog down as he was deciding to talk. What was I saying? Yeah, so basically, I want the narrative and the story to get together and for people to discuss the merits as well, because open source doesn't mean giving away for free. It means, in this case, retaining the license and allowing other blockchains to build on it. And the point is to create innovators and builders and creators so that new inventions and new ideas can be built without threat or worry. And the key point is that as much as I like or dislike how nChain has gone over the years, I feel strongly that they could have been innovating a lot more, and they were supposed to be more leaders in the space and the entire space. And they have failed to live up to that expectation. And so I'm putting a foot in the butt and I'm giving it a bit of a shove.
Okay.
And I
good.
want either nChain to innovate, or I want other people to innovate. And this also, basically, imagine it as a playing board, right? If you get a lot more innovators, even from other blockchains or even out of the crypto space, and then they are innovators which nChain, which has a lot of money behind it, can go, hey, we can recruit you, and we have all the patents, and we are like years ahead of the game. So it opens up the board of employment for nChain to get in people who are actually innovating and building stuff, because that's what we need. And if the current people at nChain are not working hard enough, they need to work harder. And if they feel that other people are going to innovate ahead of them, and then again, they need to work harder and pull their finger out and start building things. It's been slow, to say the
Scott,
least. And I'm hoping that with recent change in management, it will start building up again.
Scott, you're up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you not think that's like what Block Dojo are doing? Because obviously Block Dojo, they release all the companies that they're setting up, and like I put a post today about some of the companies that were coming up, and there was everything from Pet ID to vegetables, the sourcing of vegetables and where they're coming from. Do you not think Block Dojos is enough, or do you think there needs to be outwards activity as well?
I love what I love what Block Dojo are doing. I've loved it from the start, but to your second point, it's not enough, and it's BSV centered, which is great. I love it, of course, but yeah, again, it's not enough. I want it bigger. I want more people attracted to the technology. And my main key thing is Bitcoin to be built upon and to succeed. And we've had certain blockages in the nChain BSV space for the last several years, not naming any names. Um, but things could have gone faster. Finally, Terranode is getting released, and this is great, and we can see the testnet and everything like that, but we still need things built. If it's just Terranode sitting there saying, hey, we can do like 1 million TPS, excellent. Not so excellent if people are not actually using it.
Yeah, well, we see that something's changed. Now that Ager Hansen is out, and now he's been out for a while, but now also the big change was Matthews is now left nChain, which he's been around or kind of been retired in the background in the board, and now there was a I haven't seen it like a press release, but I don't know if it was Scott or somebody shared that Matthews left nChain, and he was the acting CEO more recently, and now he's out. So what does that mean for going forward? And really, Joel, how exactly, the way I understand, I mean, how exactly should the patents, do you think it should be disclosed with these patents and the intellectual property? Is it just show it's more black and white, where, hey, if you're using BSV blockchain, then you're not going to be, you can, I mean, how do you think that the patents should work with nChain?
Right, so they should be released for enabled use across all blockchains. And two, that nChain retains the licensing rights on all their patents. Three, not all patents, unless they've actually been granted the patent, they shouldn't be released or open source the technology using that. And to be clear, Terranode comes under that, because not all the patents which Terranode uses has been fully granted yet. So people thinking, oh, they're going to open source Terranode, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But eventually it will. Yeah. So and I also I'm on the fence on military use patents. In a way, I feel that nChain should hold on to those, but I'm a bit 50-50 on that.
Nice. Looks like Kevin Healy joined us. I haven't seen you up here before, man. How you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm doing good. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to just be able to talk. There's a few times I wanted to jump in, but I couldn't. But I think to Joel's point is, like the patent, it's sort of, if you get a patent, like the intention is you're going to build this thing and you want your 20-year or whatever protection. And I think with nChain, they've patented so much stuff, but they're, whether you call it a blockage or whatever, I think it's a more complicated discussion. But they're not necessarily building at the rate that most of us would want. And then if somebody like Auger Hansen gets in there and then starts kind of breaking the original promise, which is as long as you're building on BSV, we're not going to come after you. And I don't know the exact details of what was happening, but I knew that when he was talking with S-Script and stuff, it was like he was trying to, get like an unfair deal there.
A hostile takeover of S-Script for sure. S-Script was smart. They saw that and said, pound sand, you can, forget it. But I know that he did that to other companies.
Exactly. And so to have somebody like that to be able to get involved, then that's doesn't give a sense of certainty for builders in the space. But what we need is people that are going to build, and I think even if you look at the history of why nChain was set up, Craig said to Stefan in those original meetings, like, hey, I'm not a good leader, or I don't want to lead. You know how I am. I just want to work with people on ideas. But we need somebody that actually does want to lead teams and does want to build things. And so how do we do that is a question. I think the open source is a good topic.
Is it true that Matthews is out?
I don't know. I think so, but I don't know. I think he's consulting or something. But I don't know the details.
Yes, Matthews is out, and
Kevin
has it spot on about my view on the patents, and also just to add in as well that with my view, all it actually really needs is Calvin to put the issue to the board. With Calvin's control of shares and the support behind me, there would be enough to make it happen. So that's all it needs. It needs the message to get to Calvin, for Calvin to understand why it's a good thing and why it will bring a lot of development and growth to our sector.
What exactly is the initiative?
Sorry, say that again.
Well, you're saying it's a good thing. What's the initiative? What's the initiative that he should bring to the board?
That we should open source the patents, nChain patents, and to all blockchains. And also, there's another point as well, is that Kevin briefly touched on it. nChain needs to bring out a clearer rights of use for the patents, because there was a promise, there was a BCH patent usage before BSV, but it needs to be redone and made clear, because again, Kevin touched on it. Auger Hansen made a mess of things, and it didn't leave a good taste in people's mouths.
Good old Auger Hansen. Yep, he was a fox in the henhouse. Kurt, over to you. I see you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I think on top of that, like the IP, I've always been, I'm not a big fan of IP. I understand why it's there. I'm not like overtly critical of intellectual property or patents in general, but I am, however, a critic of, a company's core focus being its intellectual property. Like, a company like Pfizer, for example, gets criticized for the way that they use patent technology to stop smaller competitors from coming into the market. And, that's to be expected. This is typical corporate IP strategy. But on top of their corporate IP strategy, a company like Pfizer also is doing tens of billions of dollars a year in revenue on product. and so they have customers, global customer base. And in my opinion, that actually should be the key thing. Like, I think the patent strategy, if were I in charge, the focus would be heavily on commercialization. And nChain doesn't need 100 developers or however many people are there. Patent attorneys and these kind of things. Like, when you have a patent portfolio the size of theirs, the thing that actually matters is commercialization, because even in litigation, like, there might be litigation about patents that a company like nChain would win if they had customers using it. But in a situation where, they created it but never really did anything with it, and a blockchain, maybe a blockchain company like Ethereum is doing lots of business with it and whatever else, and in that litigation, it could turn into,
it's a standing issue. Kurt, you're actually 100% right. There's the opposing viewpoint would say lack of standing, saying, well, you may have some of that property, but you just, okay, let me give it perspective like this. And I just thought of this. Let's say that you're a big landlord in the US. We're having this problem where these giant companies like BlackRock, they're buying homes all over Florida and big communities, and then they're sitting vacant. They're like 300 homes. They're just sitting in there. And then, they just go and deteriorate, but they never use them. And so now if they want to sue over them, hey, you're using my home over there or whatever, you're messing with my home. And the court's going to be like, well, you neglected that home. You never did anything with it. It sat there for years. So it could potentially be a standing issue if they don't use the patents and the inventions and they try to litigate over them. It could be. I could see that as an opposing viewpoint.
For sure. Well, and you even see the same thing in property, like squatters' rights becomes a thing over time. If a company is like, hey, yeah, we've been in this industry now, like, we are the industry standard for a decade, and this guy's showing up, like, yeah, maybe we owe him something, like, we'll give him some kind of token of appreciation for creating the IP, but we're the real company that's doing the business here. So like there are situations like that where nChain really needs to catch up on commercialization in order to say, hey, yes, they may be the bigger one, but they have gotten bigger off of our intellectual property. And we are also an economic actor in this niche of the economy that uses the patent. And we would be the biggest one if our patent was not being used unfairly by our largest competitor. Like, that becomes a much more arguable conversation. But again, if nChain is just like, yeah, we've been here for 12 years, we don't have any customers, and we have all this IP, like, it's the kind of thing that a patent attorney or a judge would look at and say, yeah, here, you get whatever, you get $3 million and 1% royalties. Right. Get out of here.
Yeah, you're lacking. You're lacking standing. It's a standing issue.
Yeah,
and I'm really glad you brought that up. That I hadn't even considered it. It's definitely a strategic. When this gets back to the guys up there at nChain, I mean, if they do, I think it's important that we brought that up. I really want to know more about, like, I guess, okay, I don't know if it was Joel or Scott or somebody shared a video about Elon Musk and how he open sourced the patents that he had for electric cars. And did you want to make that argument, Joel, or whoever else? Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was Scott who shared it with me and everyone, and I watched it. It was very good, and I agree with the philosophy. Innovate. It inspires innovation instead of, and exactly what Kurt was saying. Otherwise, companies become just basically. nChain is becoming what they have been accusing us of it becoming, of just sitting there and doing nothing with patents. And it's a sad case to see, because they have a lot of. It's like having a shit ton of ammo, but just sitting on it and doing nothing with it. Innovate, or make space for people who will innovate. Right, is my thing. And, opening it up will make space for people who will innovate, because a lot of people will not come to BSV. We want them on BSV, but a lot of people will explore other blockchains first for their own reasons, because numbers go high, or because they see BSV as a scam or a fraud or whatever. But as long as they can build and create, because anything successful on any other blockchain will not have a throughput, the TPS, that BSV provides. As simple as that. And it's not a case of just like open sourcing Terranode eventually and people copy pasting that, because you can't just completely copy the tech, because there's still licensing rights. And also the other thing is about the licensing rights is that if people think they're going to create assassination markets, and then they've got another thing coming, because you can still pull the plug on that and say, no, you're not using patents for the assassination markets. So tough shit on that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. What Elon Musk did is he open sourced the electric car rights, and he just said, go ahead and build. I want competition, and it drove the other companies to build electric cars apparently, and the industry boomed. And now look at the success he's having. I mean, it's definitely a good example.
Yeah, I would say the difference between Tesla and nChain is that Tesla is constantly building stuff. And at this point, I know there's a few products that nChain has built, and they also do the bespoke things. But part of the problem, I think, with nChain is that it's like, well, we there's not, at least from what I've seen, I don't think there's a team that can quickly build it while competitors. So that could be an argument in favor of the patents for now.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Tesla, like Elon Musk isn't afraid to give away intellectual property because Elon Musk is willing to work harder than basically anybody. So he looks at you and says, yeah, I'll give you my best ideas because I'm going to work 20 hours a day and you're going to work 6 hours a day. And over the course of a year, I am going to be 3 times further down a path than you are, because because the idea is only one portion of the thing. It's actually one of my favorite things that Gary Vaynerchuk says all the time. Every time he comes up with a brilliant invention or a brilliant business idea, he goes and talks about it on stage. Says, you do it. Here's an idea. I'm in a room with 1,000 people or 5,000 people that claim to be entrepreneurs, but I'm going to give you $1 billion idea and nobody in this room is going to do anything with it. And it shows very clearly that the idea is only so much of it. Like to really be an entrepreneur, to go get a customer, to build that customer up, to turn them into a valuable client, and then to scale that out to get thousands or millions of valuable clients, like that's a completely different situation. And most people don't have the gumption to do it. And to date, nChain has not been able to do that, which is really unfortunate because they're full of great ideas. But I don't know how hard it is to hire like 3 or 4 really good biz dev guys and then a few ops managers or customer success teams or whatever. But it seems to me that with the budget and the IP and all the stuff that they do have, that would be a relatively straightforward thing for them to start to commercialize, especially given that they do genuinely have at least a few really good ideas. Even if 90% of their patents are fluff or whatever, that still means there's like 50 really good ideas there that could be commercialized. And if you can't sell those ideas, you can't sell anything.
Let's go over to the incoming potential nChain CEO over there, Mr. Jack Pitts. Okay, how's he doing with Slictionary, buddy? Good morning. You over there? Yeah.
Very funny.
I
Yeah,
know. I'm
Can you
joking
hear
with
me?
you. Go ahead.
Wow, Jack really liked that intro.
Come on, Jack. We got it. You could do better than Edgar Hansen. I mean, come on. Anybody could do better.
Well, I would like to jump in and talk a little bit about just patents overall to establish a bit of a base here, because I think it's a little too easy to just try to make this black and white and say, well, this is what you should do with patents and this is what you shouldn't do with patents, because the patent industry is a little bit more complicated than that. And from my experience, first with patents was I owned Blackberry stock in 2002. I was a professional, what I call stock picker, but what other people call equity analyst at a major financial fund that managed money. And at the end of 2002, kind of like almost this exact time period in late December, we got this announcement that BlackBerry was going to raise $1 billion and in a secondary. And that to me was very bad because it dilutes me and means my stock's probably not going to go up as much. And so I was very concerned. And after investigating as to why they were raising the money, it turned out that BlackBerry was about to release their first smartphone. And honestly, it really was the first smartphone. I know that Nokia would like to claim that and a bunch of other people, but BlackBerry very much invented the first smartphone, and they were on a kind of a cruddy Canadian network, and they were trying to get it into the American market, and AT&T was going to be their first customer. And so it was a really big event because up until then, BlackBerry was more of a pager company, if anybody's old enough to remember that era. And their problem was AT&T said to them, look, guys, you're this like tiny little Canadian company, and we realize that from going over your tech that you guys actually have pretty much the first smartphone. It's so cool. We want to give it to all our customers. But you've got this one major problem. There's this tiny patent troll that owned, I don't remember if it was 6 patents or a dozen or a couple dozen, but they had already sued BlackBerry about a year before that, and it was starting to come to a head. And AT&T said, your balance sheet is so small that if you lose this case, we don't trust that you'll even be in business. So, and AT&T at the time was the second, either the biggest or second biggest cell phone carrier in the United States, and the United States is kind of big. So that's a major problem. Big companies don't like to set their foot down on flimsy rocks, right? So this all came to a head, and the solution was, well, the maximum they could imagine losing in this patent troll case, and by patent troll, I mean like one lawyer bought these patents, right, and sued this somewhat decent sized company in BlackBerry. And they had actually already done a few licensing deals with other sort of smartphone-y type providers before that, like Palm Pilot and whatnot, maybe even Nokia and Samsung. And so they were establishing themselves in the patent market as, these flimsy little patents that this guy probably paid a couple $100,000 for. And, he was just kind of a homegrown lawyer, so to speak. It was making a definite impact, and it was affecting stock price, and it was resulting in tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars difference to people like me. So what ended up happening was Research in Motion raised the $1 billion, which assured AT&T that they would be around even if they lose the case, and therefore the AT&T phone came out, and the rest is history. Apple competed, and here we have this giant cell phone industry. Google kind of stole Apple's idea, thanks to Eric Schmidt, and here we are. We have all these giant, cell phone industry is ginormous, but the patent troll ended up winning. And, I don't know if it took a year, but the damages were $600 million that BlackBerry was ordered to pay. And I think this all came to a head years later. But the point is that a patent troll is different suing a big company that has products than, say, Apple. I don't know if you can hear me, Mike. Than say Apple suing
Loud
Qualcomm.
and clear.
Yeah. So Apple suing Qualcomm is a completely different bowl of wax, right? Apple's making arguments like, okay, Qualcomm, you provide the baseband chip in all of our phones, and we use that, and you keep updating the patent and changing your chip, and you're kind of like screwing us because you're charging us something like, I'm going to use numbers that aren't real, but just for the sake of you understanding it, let's just say Qualcomm charged Apple 5% of every phone. So on a $700 phone, Qualcomm gets $35. And obviously the baseband chip is, 25 cents, 30 cents. So we're talking about a major difference here. And, one of the reasons why Qualcomm is so profitable. And, that's a completely different style case because both companies have something to lose. Apple is building their own baseband chips and have their own IP, and they filed a ton of patents on their own. and the baseband chip is probably diverging in terms of the circuits and all the little tricks they use to make the baseband chip work better. And frankly, Apple's probably more qualified than Qualcomm at this point to design base chips because they have a customer, right? And customers are one of the best sources of patents that there ever was, because what a customer wants, an OEM will provide, and the OEM's tech department will usually come up with the solutions much easier than, say, an nChain or Qualcomm, who doesn't make cell phones, coming up with it out of the blue. And so the tables can kind of turn, and that's why Apple sued Qualcomm, because the tables are starting to turn, and they're saying, hey, you don't deserve 5% of our revenues when we have 10 million things that go into an iPhone. And if they all wanted 5%, we wouldn't even get to make a profit. We wouldn't even get all of our revenues would be gone. So that's different. And Tesla opening up their patent portfolio after they've already built the Gigafactory and plopped down all over the United States and Europe and probably Asia too, a bunch of charging stations, and then saying, our patents are now open. You can now use our plug type, so that we don't have 20 different plug types like we do a little bit in the cell phone industry. Kind of a similar concept with the lightning cable versus the one that USB 3 or whatever. So these things are, they're somewhat more complicated than you think, and it's not so easy to just say, well, nChain should do this or nChain should do that. nChain has to consider where they are, and what makes nChain unique is in the two examples I just gave you, Apple suing Qualcomm, where Apple's like a real product company and so is Qualcomm, and a patent troll suing Blackberry, where the patent troll is literally like a little lawyer in Canada that came up with a pretty clever patent troll scheme. And I say troll loosely. Some patents are real, and you can invest in them and sue people. And others, the Blackberry patent was pretty awful. I mean, there wasn't any real tech in there, which is kind of interesting, because when I read some of nChain's patents, I see definite tech in there. And we can argue as to how important it is, but I would say it's quite important. We can talk about it later. I don't want to hog the whole thing, but when you get into Turing complete, some of nChain's patents, which I've looked at, are really clever and kind of interesting in many ways. But anyway, back to the point, nChain's kind of a combo company. They could be considered a patent troll if that's all they did. And maybe from 2015 to, say, I don't know, 2020, when they first came out with their first kind of software product, they could have been considered a patent troll, because that's what they were doing. That's what Craig was tasked to do. They paid him lots of money to patent the shit out of the cryptocurrency industry. And that's fine. But at the same time, they also have aspirations of being a product company. And as you guys have already mentioned, and Kurt already said, there's not a lot going on there, right? And we sort of know the reason, because BSV has such a bad rap that no one wants to touch it. And they're trying to sell to enterprises and government, which are the longest sales cycles you can possibly go for. They're really, really, really hard to sell enterprises and governments. If you have any questions about that, just ask Stefan at Unisat. He's got a great product, which makes a ton of sense. I wanted to invest in it, and the reason I didn't ultimately, or we made possibly a harder deal to invest in it than he liked at the time, which he didn't need my investments, but it turned out that the sales cycle is too long. So it's like I needed like a really sweet price to invest in a company whose sales cycle could be 10 years or 5 years, because you have to wait, and you're not going to get a lot of juice while you wait. So that's going to result in a different type of an ROI for an investment. And so all these things have to be considered. And I would say nChain is probably struggling a little bit with, are we a product company or are we a patent troll? If they were a patent troll, they should have sued Ethereum and anybody they could ages ago, like years ago. If they're a product company, they have to tread a little more lightly, because if you're a product company and you're producing a product, then your product probably most likely infringes on other patents in the industry. And then things get complicated. And then you get into things like, well, we could spend all this money suing IBM for Hyperledger or Ethereum for this thing, but then they're going to sue us back because these are people that have their own patents. And this should be pretty obvious. I mean, Copa is a patent organization. And so their whole point is they're circling the wagons and they're protecting all this $4 trillion crypto business from what they consider this, or what they would like to paint nChain as this evil patent troll that just that's similar to the guy who was suing Blackberry, in 2002 with these patents that were frankly awful, horrendous patents. Where in America they were able to convince kind of a pretty dumb jury that they were relevant, and they really were not relevant. I can even talk to details about what the patents were. I've read a lot of patents. I've read a lot of Apple patents. I've read all of the patents that were
Who was
involved in
that company?
case.
Have we heard of them, Jack? The patent troll.
I don't remember their name anymore. And honestly, whatever happened in that stock over the years, we must have sold out. So I never actually followed up to find out what ended up happening to them, or if they had to, if there was some kind of clawback on their 600 million. But I believe if you look it up, you should see somewhere in about 2002 to 2007 timeframe that Blackberry lost a $600 million case. Forgive me, I'm not looking it up myself, but I'm sure you could probably find it. But anyway, that's just a small story on how patents work in America. I'm not sure really how they work in Europe or the UK. I see Mr. Tuffy there. Maybe he can help you out there. But what I would say is it's not just a one-size-fit-all industry. There's lots of nuances involved. Patent cases are super expensive. We can ask Tufty what his hourly rate is. I'm sure it's a lot more than your average fry cook. And, you got to pay a lot of money for these things. And nChain has to constantly sit there and decide, is it worth it for us to go after these people? And if there's no downside and a ton of upside, then you go for it, right? And that's what should be getting done inside the walls of nChain. Making these decisions. And then, on sort of Joel's case, what should they do with their patents with respect to people that want to use them in the BSV industry? Well, this is also very different. And this is extremely strange because there's never really been a commodity where everybody benefits sort of by the price fluctuating. And so in a way, people at nChain might all have varying degrees of whether the price of BSV goes up or down affects them. Some might have no effect. Some may only care about their nChain ownership. And that can lead to lots of different types of decisions. So it's not just so easy to just say, well, nChain should do that, nChain should do that. They have a lot to deal with. And I personally don't know what they have to deal with because I would have to be inside the walls of nChain. It's a very private company, which I think is a shame, because to get a lot of use in something like a digital token like Bitcoin, there needs to be a lot more transparency. And I think it would benefit us all if they were more transparent about it. And I know that's painful for them. But to me, my focus is technology is usually these days, post 1950s, advanced via retail. Average Joes like you and I just, pick up Google and use it. Or, we want a computer in our home, even though it doesn't do too much in 1977. So we buy the Apple II, and then a whole industry is born. And that's what's been going on in tech for ages now. The governments and the enterprises are the very last people to adopt stuff. I mean, I was on a nuclear submarine that was built in the 80s, and you would have laughed if you seen the computers that were on board that thing. I mean, they were green screen like jokes. And my captain even brought on board a commercial bought GPS device back when they were about the size of a suitcase, and put it on the top of our submarine and mainly used that rather than the $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million device that the Navy had installed that was the size of an entire room. So, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. And I just think we all need to be a little more lenient, I guess, on some of the players as to what their decisions are, but also push for what makes sense. And I think what makes sense is if you're inside the BSV ecosystem and that ecosystem would help nChain sell their products, or who knows, maybe they have an investment in the price or something, be it tall or whatnot. That's something that should be seriously considered, because I know lots of people who are technology people that have no interest in developing a product that's going to have the rug pulled on them someday from patents. And the nice thing is, I think kind of a hybrid strategy can be adopted here, and it's already been talked about. I'm not presenting anything new. nChain has already kind of in the early days said, or at least the chief technology officer of nChain has said, we'll make our patents free to use as long as your company uses BSV blockchain or Bitcoin at the time. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And I think it's also reasonable to allow them to sue the living smack out of Ethereum and Litecoin and all these copycats that really haven't added anything other than they're better marketing their Ponzi coin to people.
Nice. Well said. Joel.
Just to say, well, throwing a few things in, is that nChain was set up to be a product company as well as using the patents to protect the industry. The products have been lacking, whether or not in the new direction with a new CEO and such, whether they're still going to be a product company. I believe that is going to be the case, but don't quote me on that. They are supposed to be that. As to like suing other blockchains and such, that option's still open to them. I mean, you can still open source the patents and go, hey, we don't like, Ethereum making shit tons of money and Ethereum Foundation and lying about it. The choices are there. But yeah, the question is, and also the open source, the open use patents at the moment is, as Jack said, only on BSV. There was a paper written out when it was BCH, so that needs to be redone from nChain's side, clarifying usage on BSV. But the point is that the argument is that it should open itself up to all blockchains so that innovators and builders can be grabbed. And also another key point I want to make out as well. Yes, there is the business model of sitting on patents and suing the crap out of other people, which I don't think's morally great myself. I personally, I'm not in favour of that approach. I think, okay, the occasional suing of a business, yes, for sure, but not as that's your only source of revenue and that's the whole thing why nChain is set up for. That would be sad for all of us. I was going to make a point. Give me 2 seconds. It's slipped out of my head. Oh yeah. There's a lot more money to be made on actually innovating and building with the patents and building the things they describe and building further than sitting on the patents and waiting to sue people. So, if nChain can get ahead with that game, with actually building the products and leading in that regard, and then they will make a hell of a lot more money.
Well, Kurt, is Terranode an example of one of the products they're building? Are they involved in that, or what's the?
Actually, it's a good question. I'm not really sure about the provenance of Terranode. I know the Shatters version absolutely was an nChain product, but as I understand it, the folks, well, at least the folks primarily working on it are Bitcoin Association, which are it is another entity. Obviously, people know each other and whatever else, but Terranode is a BSVA product, and I think partially that's done very specifically so that it's not one of those things that is perceived as part of maybe the patent portfolio. It kind of, to Joel's point, that hey, we want to let people know that this is going to be an open source thing. It is governed by a Swiss nonprofit. Like, you don't have to worry that nChain's gonna, because nChain has this reputation as, maybe too litigious or whatever. But yeah, so no, as I understand it, I don't think any nChain people specifically were working on it, and I know the two main engineers on Terranode anyways, and they are not nChain guys. So but I also don't know what I don't know.
Kurt, isn't it that the nChain, sorry, the Bitcoin Association part is sort of going to be the reference or default node software implementation, and then after that, Gorilla Pool, nChain, Tal, anybody with an interest in mining can then operate on top of that or change it or do whatever they need to do.
Correct. Yeah. So BSVA will maintain the reference client, and then any commercial interest will likely make whatever proprietary modifications that they want to make to their implementation. And that's been stated. I don't know if that's been written anywhere, like in licensing or anything like that, but that is the point. That's why Terranode is going to be a completely open source and freely licensed piece of software. And it is, frankly, it's the strategy that I've always said that miners should be and need to be doing is, whatever you're trying to optimize for as a business, you should make those optimizations in your node client. And I think that absolutely will be the case.
So what's going on with all the transactions, Kurt? Are those on the main net? I keep seeing
they are.
Yeah.
In fact, I think there was I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but one of these days was 90 million transactions in a day. And the cool thing is I don't know who they are. It's which kind of shows the power of Bitcoin's privacy model. Like, I don't have any record on the wallets that are generating the transactions. They have also changed in a significant way. So initially they were creating lots of child pays for parent long chains of transactions, which was creating some sync issues and some potential double spend risk. And then it seems to have changed. So they cleaned up whatever they're doing. And they are using Gorilla Pool's ARC implementation. So they're hitting our endpoints, but I don't know who they are. They're just public. So pretty cool, actually. The funny thing is that I've also had a few people from like the sort of nChain, Tal, BSVA spheres reach out to be like, hey, do you know who's doing this? So I'm getting the gist that it's not them either. Because if they were doing that, they probably would use Tal's endpoints and whatever else. So everybody's a little bit wondering who's doing what, and frankly, we don't know. Other than the only thing that I know about them is that they are using our ARC endpoints, and that the transactions there's no obvious pattern to them. Like, it's not just a wallet kicking back and forth, and it's not like it's a much more complex addressing scheme that's happening. So there's lots of coins being split and sent to new addresses, and then more new addresses then come into existence, and then more transactions happen. So it's I don't know what they're doing. So
how does it
pretty
compare
cool
to the 2022? I remember Jimmy Wynn was out doing, and they were, he would talk about how they were doing a lot of transactions. I don't know. How is it different from that time?
So at the time, I think almost everything was being generated by crypto fights, and that was in that era, crypto fights was the big thing, and the nature of crypto fights was that it had a fundamental issue with child pays for parent chains of transactions, which is when if your inputs have not been mined, then your inputs are in a mempool, and then you try to re-spend them before they've been mined. And you can do that a few times, but when you start trying to do that tens of thousands or getting up into millions of times, it just becomes a memory issue. So it's a resource issue where there's just this massive unsettled database of, okay, where did this chain of transactions start? And if you're not prepared for that, if you don't have sufficient resources in your memory and in your node client, it's something's got to break, right? And this is what the the small blockers are like. Yeah, so you just don't let anybody do that. You got to keep the door small enough that only small people can do business in your store. But on our side, we've been, consistently been beefing up resources and learning about efficiency up and down our stack. And yeah, I don't know the math exactly, like how many transactions were done per day at the peak with crypto fights and stuff, but these are significant. They're not huge though. They're not, we're not mining 4 gigabyte blocks, which is something that we were doing back then. We're hitting a lot of blocks that are a few hundred megabytes, but relatively straightforward. They're all pay to public key hash transactions. Like, they're not particularly complex, but it's yeah, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess.
I think some of the numbers back from the Bit Boss Casino and Crypto Fights days were something like, think of someone pulling a slot machine, a virtual slot machine, and inside of a block, 10 minutes. How many times did someone insert a penny and then pull a software one-arm bandit? And that ends up being a lot.
Right.
And so I remember they at first, the limit was something tiny, maybe even less than a dozen. And then at one point they upgraded it to like 50 or 100. And the idea was, well, we need to make it so that you can do it endlessly. And I think this may have gotten kind of resolved, maybe not at Crypto Fights, but I believe I remember a point where Craig on MetaNet said something like, well, it's not our fault that they didn't know how to use nChain's. Well, kind of true, but nobody back then really knew what to do with nChain's, right? And I think it was the October 2021 blockchain conference where there was a company called like Bitphone or something, a really, really nice young guy. I wish he was still around. He was really good, really good on the technology side of things. And he built sort of the winning app for that conference, which allowed you to kind of make a phone call with someone and bill per second or something. And he was the first to really use nChain's to do that. And I think I always forget his name. Kurt, you can tell me that. What's the name of the software guy at Crypto Fights?
David
Case? Yeah. I wish he was here because he would be able to tell us a lot more. But
he might be, actually. I saw him not too long ago, was listening, but now it's become a big list. So David, if you want to put your hand up, or we'd probably get you in here.
Yeah, he'd probably be able to give us some numbers. I'm just freebasing here, but the point is that I think that those kinds of things can and could have been solved, but once again, this annoying guy who seems to have all the knowledge of how Bitcoin can work at an optimum level doesn't always tell you everything. So you're kind of stuck getting little tidbits from him, and then lo and behold, he releases the tidbit, and next thing you know, you have some app using the exact thing that he talked about. You get another.
You're talking about the Aussie man bad?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He has this way about him that it's just so cocky in a way. It's not arrogant. There's a big difference in arrogance. And I'm around attorneys, and attorneys are oftentimes they're very arrogant. And I consider arrogance a huge weakness and a point of opportunity. I wouldn't say in any way he's arrogant, but he's confident and incredibly cocky, like very confident what he does. And I mean, I would imagine.
I would say it's almost the opposite. He doesn't want to tell you how to do anything because then he could be blamed for playing favorites, or, oh, he likes this guy and he gave him a solution. So I think he's very wary of that, and it kind of almost pains him to have to explain stuff to you, because then, again, you're guilty of playing favorites. But to go back to along that line, and to talk again about the reference implementation of Terranode, I think the idea there is that the reason the BA is doing it rather than nChain is because there's a few things that I think Craig and nChain and Calvin and everybody want to be default. And one of them is the DAR, and I know it's super controversial, but there's a reason for this. And the reason is because Bitcoin SV and the original Bitcoin were built to be within the law. I mean, to make it perfectly, repeatable, and that's not weird, right? I mean, Nobel invented dynamite and didn't envision it being dropped in 500-pound bombs on European cities, and that's the whole reason why he established the Nobel Peace Prize, because he was embarrassed. Same thing with airplanes. The very first thing they did with airplanes is they took them over to World War I and the Red Baron, and everybody was just shooting the hell out of people, right? And I don't think that's why the Wright brothers envisioned wanting to learn how to make flying machines. There's 99 reasons for flying machines, and one of them is bombing the hell out of people. You can't take that away from the military, but I'm just saying the inventors of these things, they really don't think, oh, cool, I invented a new money. Let's do heroin and pot and all this other stuff. And there's gray areas there, of course. But the point is, I think that the reference implementation is designed so that when some noob comes in and just says, oh, I just want to make money mining Bitcoin, they're given the implementation that does allow the DAR, I hope I'm saying that right, or anything else, like zero sat outputs may not be easily done on Terranode. That was a big discussion a couple of years ago. And I think Craig again clarified, like, why would you have zero? Okay, fine. The software currently lets you do it. Why the hell would you want to clutter everything up with these things when they're not needed? Just use a SAT, and lo and behold, now one SAT ordinals and ordinals are the norm. And so I think the idea is, let's put out a reference product that does have SPV, that has everything that the original white paper asked of it. All the sections are covered. We know what to do with transactions from a protocol level. And once that's established, that doesn't mean, like the Coron's BTC organization, it doesn't mean that they govern everything, right? You can take the reference implementation of Terranode and alter it and do whatever the fuck you want with it, okay? It's not a restriction. It's just saying, hey, you want to join the NBA? Well, we have a 3-point line, and it's 35 feet here and 32 feet here. If you're going to build a stadium in Sacramento or Las Vegas, then you should probably build it to these specifications, or we may not let you in. And that's sort of what BSV is, right? It's the collection of honest nodes that want to enforce the original protocol. And this also ties into the estoppel case, which is Craig's way of saying, hey, you can't let Satoshi promise all these things like SPV and the alert key, and then just not do it. And then it ends up being different. And so that's why he's suing BTC. It's not so much to gain the 2 trillion or whatever. It's such a ridiculous number. It's not so much to gain the 2 trillion. It's really just to show that, like, this is how the world really works. I mean, this isn't like fooling around stuff anymore. Grandma can say, hey, you screwed me out of $5 million worth of Bitcoin because you changed the code. Now I'm not able to spend it, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think all these things tie in: the estoppel case, the fact that BA is the one producing Terranode, and that it's a base implementation that should favor the nodes running Bitcoin the way it's supposed to be running.
I love the litigation strategy. I want to comment on that, but let me go over to Brett C. Banfy. Hands up.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on that and compare it to the Constitution, because there are certain rights that are.
Hold on.
Are
mute your mic if you're not speaking, please.
Certain rights that are inalienable, and once those rights are declared as inalienable, they just sort of become de facto inalienable, right? And if all of a sudden a new party comes into power and just says, like, okay, I know the old party said that you have these inalienable rights, but that was a different day. We've decided that those are alienable, and we're going to alienate them right now. Then basically there's an estoppel case against that. You can say, hold on a second, like, I've been living under this idea that these rights are inalienable, and that I have these as this is the promise of being an American, and when that promise can't be changed, and if that promise is changed, then every single American has an estoppel right against to to say that that is unconstitutional. And so we, the thing is that, what Craig, I think, is teaching us with this estoppel concept, and he's articulating, is that, so often the people are the ones that just get the shaft. It's like, okay, well, I know we all said that Bitcoin was going to be this, but you know what? The smart guys are in the room now, and we all have Blockstream email addresses, and we're just shafting the people who have come to rely on these statements of this is what Bitcoin is, this is what it represents, and who have gotten involved with the network based on these presumptions. And so, it'd be the equivalent of like, a techno group getting in power at in the governing halls of America, and just deciding like, hey, all that hogwash about, inalienable rights and stuff like that, we're changing that because, it's a new day and age, and we got a lot of money from, the Bilderberg group to build our version of a better society. And so, in this case, I think Craig is just very principled. He's just standing up, but not, what the really important thing is, he's not standing up as Satoshi. He's standing up just like, like if George Washington were alive today, and or Thomas Jefferson, and they tried to do, the inalienable, or change the inalienable rights, then he would have a unique take on why those shouldn't be, inalienated or whatever. But in Craig's case, he's just standing up as like a normal person, just an average American. It doesn't matter whether he was, involved in the forming or the writing of the Constitution or not. Just like it doesn't matter if you're just an average American, because you've come to rely on that concept, and that once that concept has been put into motion and put into place, this is why Satoshi said basically, like, once the core idea of Bitcoin was put into place, it was sort of, put into place forever. And it's for these exact reasons. And then I'll step down after that.
Oh, really quick, but before you do that, you were just over there at the, was it the AWS conference in Las Vegas? Have you
Yeah.
how'd that go?
Oh, it was awesome. It was absolutely incredible. Walking the floor in these tech halls and just talking to people about what's possible. It's amazing. And, my colleague, I'll take a second to just, comment about something that my colleague noticed about me as I'm walking these floors. Is he mentioned to me, and I really appreciated him saying this, that, one of my unique skill sets is being able to translate this for the audience that I'm with. So when we're talking with, we ended up talking with 1Password. 1Password is, building a centralized identity solution, etc. And, they're doing a really great job with that. And when we had conversations with them, we started things off by just saying, hey, you know what? You're really positioned to be a first mover in this concept, this industry of a decentralized identifier, a sovereign identity. So we're telling them, hey, you don't have to completely, you don't have to be left behind because a new technology is coming along that maybe replaces some of the centralized concepts that you've done such a good job building. What you could do is take you're doing all of these identity management tools and things like this. You're using a centralized model, but you can just sort of build in parallel. And that's one of the beautiful things about blockchain. It's so cheap that you don't actually have to gut all of your infrastructure and say, you know what, we're going full hog on the decentralized model, and we're going to gut all this. No, you can build in parallel because it's so cheap to just test. And we're talking with different teams, like Capital One was there. They're a major bank, etc. But they have an innovation lab, and so we're talking to them. Like, how can we get in touch with your innovation lab? How can we start talking about these companies? They want to be on the bleeding edge, and with blockchain, you have the capability of actually sandboxing some of these ideas, and then seeing if they can actually stick. So that was.
Before I go to the questions here with Meta, the new speaker, what is the value add? Let's say that I'm Capital One, and you know what? I want to be on the cutting edge, and I want to use blockchain. What's the value add? Like in a, I guess that's just to their team.
Yeah, and Gavin, we've had so many conversations, and I talked to you about one of my dad's first tools when he was going to how to sell copy machines, how to sell fax machines. My dad was a pioneer in that industry, inter-office communications, etc. And in the beginning, there were so few fax machines that existed that the proposition couldn't be, hey, you can fax your, the companies that you're doing business with. So he started off with, hey, you can fax your inner department. So you can have your accounting department faxing your payables or department or whatever, right? So how would Capital One be interested in using this technology? Yes, it would be great if all of the major institutions, the big banks, were all using a unified payment system, that was built in through the Bank of International Settlements, that was all blockchain and all of that stuff. But you don't have to. You could just build it as just core infrastructure for how to move finances around your own company to get, your sales department and your accounting department and all these different departments connected through an interconnected network. And then once you realize that it actually solves all of these efficiencies, I want to go back to one quick comment that Alex Agut, who developed Handcash, he brought this to my attention. I found it was one of the most instructive stories. He went into San Francisco and he spoke with a senior engineer at Venmo, and he was demonstrating Handcash for the Venmo team. And they actually said to him, this is so mind-blowing that you can move a penny around. We as Venmo, even though we're using an account-based model, we can't even move anything less than 15 cents, even though we're using our own databases, because there's so much checks and balances in terms of, the accounting oversight and all of these different red tape, even within their own system. So, if you just talk about how would Capital One use it, they could just use it to manage flow funds within their own company. That way, if anything ever went wrong, it's like, oh, the sales department ended up with $100,000 they shouldn't have had. Well, it doesn't matter because, it's all the same company. But then once you realize how practical and how efficient it is just on a payments front within your own inner department, it only becomes a matter of time until it just explodes to the rest of the world.
Nice. Good one. Okay, let's go over to hands up. Meta, you got your hand up. First time caller.
First time caller. I don't have a question. I have comments if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Please go ahead.
So I've been around for a little bit, and I don't talk about it as often anymore. My account's more focused on other things, but some of the people in here know me. And I just wanted to, uh, listening to what everybody's talking about. I wanted to mention that for the period of time that I kind of went quiet on this topic around Bitcoin SV, I spent some time just kind of going back to first principles and trying to relearn everything. Not really relearn it, but more kind of remove all my Bitcoin SV bias that had built up, or what I would call bias, just to see if I was missing anything. And really trying to steel man BTC to the point where I might be convinced that actually everybody in Bitcoin SV has it all wrong, and God forbid Kurt has it all wrong, but I was willing to take that risk, and what I like, just starting from scratch, I run into the same issues that, come up time and time again. And what I kind of settled on, when uh I can't remember your name, the Slictionary guy.
Jack.
I know, what was it?
Jack.
Yeah, yeah. So when he was talking about, operating within the law, and then we talk about like the utility that Brett was just talking about, like there's something real here that people can benefit from. I think on a fundamental level, it comes down to what money is, what just money is, and what it's ordered towards. And that's something that I don't think in the Bitcoin ecosystem writ large people talk about anymore, because the price of BTC is so high, and the crypto ecosystem has expanded to millions of different iterations of some sort of blockchain technology. And my point in saying all of this is that when we're asking what Bitcoin is and what it's for, I think that what I've settled on is that that it's important because it can be just money, meaning that it's money that serves the common good. You know, that's on a really basic level. It's money that serves the common good. And the the thing that BTC has really focused on is store of value, but there's not really a focus on what serves the most people in the best way, i.e., the common good. And for me, BSV or big block Bitcoin, or the idea of Bitcoin itself, being able to be used equitably. So not that everybody would use it the same, but that everybody has access, is incredibly important for the future. And I don't know what it looks like and what how things will pan out. You know, when it comes to ticker symbols and all that. But I do think that after, you know, some of the time I've spent trying to steelman BTC, I ended up in the same boat at the end of all of it. Well, not that I've finished it, but you know, I'm still in the same boat because I can see that the value of you know, having utility, uh you know, to being able to use this stuff for something that's real, namely as a medium of exchange, but also to facilitate integrity of data, and access, you know, transparency for all the transactions that we make. All of that's super important. I think that if we focus on the fundamentals, and less on, you know, things like the Bitcoin Association and you know, lawsuits.
nChain. Yeah,
Yeah.
lawsuits. So
Ye-
did you join the Blockstream community, or what happened? Did you what's your story?
Um, no. I was so I was I kind of got into BSV because I was in a lot of spaces debating BTC people, but not from a big block perspective. I was just criticizing some of the problems that I saw, um, you know, and there's a lot of stuff. So exchanges, Tether. I called the FTX collapse. Not that that's very impressive because plenty of people were doing it, but I debated it. And I wish I had the recordings where I told people that FTX would be next to go. And, you know, I got laughed out of the room.
Hmm.
And so like I had these debates, and then I encountered BSV people, um, you know, sometime before that. And then you know, I got a hand cash wallet. Someone sent it to me. Then I had to like start over, and I had to like, go, okay, what's going on here? And that's when I kind of met everybody. You know, I recognize a lot of faces in this room right now. But I met everybody, and that's how I got into it. But you know, with everything that happened in the last bear run, not because I've lost money or anything, but you know, my account is more focused on my faith and my religion. But the thing that I did was, you know, maybe I had to be intellectually honest and say maybe I'm wrong. um you know, maybe I'm not seeing something. So I had to go, you know, start from scratch, look at both sides and try to steel man, like really try to be on the other side arguing against, you know, what I had been arguing for so long. And part of that was like, let's read the Bitcoin standard. And who does he depend on? You know, Austrian economics, Karl Menger, you know, Mises, Rothbard, De Soto, in more modern times. And so like going back and like reading stuff and getting under an understanding of money, and you know, because I'm Catholic and I'm a Thomist, you know, I follow you know, St. Thomas Aquinas's philosophy and his contemporaries and all that. You know, the Menger, you know, got a lot of the ideas started with the school of Salamanca, in, you know, Catholic philosophy. And so it was kind of enjoyable for me because I was able to go back, to the extent that, you know, some of the works were translated, and look at the school of Salamanca's theory of value, money and economics. And you know, what I came down to the conclusion of was, you know, what is Bitcoin, number one? What is it in its existence, and what is it for? And is it ordered towards the common good? And I can't say that for BTC because it to me in a lot of ways, it's become unjust, and I don't even know if I'd call it money, but it's become unjust in so many ways that I can't possibly support it. You know, at a global level for the common good, because I think it does the opposite of that. But I do think that Bitcoin is super important, and that we do need it, and it can serve the common good, but it's going to require uh, something that's useful, that can emerge from its use, like the utility, and I think that's it can become money, if we have enough use of it, and you don't
How
get use if you
Let
can't,
me
you
ask
know.
you a question. Maybe you and anybody else in the space want to answer this if you want to. But I'm watching these influencers on YouTube and other places, and they're talking about how we gotta get rid of the banks and the banksters, and they say buy BTC because it goes against the banks, and it's the way to have our own way. We own BTC together, and that way we're getting rid of the banks. I mean, I hear this narrative. They've got websites, they've got a lot of push behind this thing. And I mean, is there any truth to that?
No, I don't think so, because the whole idea is that you're holding this, money, because it's a store of value, and it's just going to go up, and it's a hedge against inflation, and we know all the talking points, but the problem is that um you know at the end of the day, like, will you be able to use it, for other things? And the argument, I think, on their side is that, well, you're not going to really have to, because what it's going to be is this thing that we're holding, like, digital gold or gold, and that we can create something, maybe outside of that people can use, uh as uh
Eh,
as money, or whatever, a
the-
medium of exchange.
yeah. Well, it sounds like a great sales pitch though, because if you're selling like a Lightning Network business, you could make money on the Lightning Network. And if you say buy BTC and then you use our other side chains, like,
Yeah.
isn't that just like having a bank all over again? You're on now with a third party again. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know about side chains. I mean, I know
or
Lightning Network,
Lightning Network.
does mimic payment services, networks in
Yeah.
many ways. I mean, there is some security built in and all that, but the problem is that it has a similar scaling problem, because you still have to open a transaction, on the main chain, and if we're going to go into this hyper Bitcoinization world, to use Daniel Krawitz's original term, and everybody wants to use a BTC, as money, that you still have a scaling problem. So it doesn't, not only that, but there are nefarious actors that can operate on the Lightning Network, which is why you have these watchtowers in the first place, to monitor those transactions. So I think that at the end of the day, like, they are running up against this issue. I think the block size will arise again, in terms of the conversation happening, because in the future, we have the block subsidy, the block reward is going to get halved again, and unless, and I was wrong, not wrong, but I had mentioned previously that in order for the next phase, right, the next halving to be sustainable, I think in most cases you would have to go to 100,000. I didn't necessarily think it would, but I said it was certainly possible, because there's so much market manipulation with Tether still out there, and exchanges, that it was certainly possible. And they bought some time, so the price of BTC is 100,000, and the block reward, even though it got halved, still able to kind of maintain things. But I don't see a world in which the issue of not replacing the block reward with fees, doesn't become a problem. There's no fee market, and there won't be, because people won't be able to use it, and it's going to get dire. I mean, Bitcoin would have to go to much higher levels, and maybe it will, but I don't see it as sustainable.
Hmm. Nice. All right, cool. I mean, Kurt, is next up, is BTC going to go to 1 million now? That's what Michael Saylor said. So should we believe him? I mean, is it?
Yeah, I mean, Michael's never wrong, so that's let's remind ourselves how cool he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I don't really care. Frankly, I mean, I guess I hope it does. Like, why not? So, I mean, just like anything else, it's, Nvidia going to, being the best performing stock of the last couple of years is like, is that good or bad? Like, what does that represent? Like, it doesn't really matter. I mean, ultimately, most of the economy needs to be productive for its own reasons, and BTC has decided that productivity is something for poor people to deal with, and ultimately, like the rich people will have BTC, and forever they will just keep getting richer and richer and richer. Like, this is the Citadel meme. You can go back a decade and look at, like, it's funny because they literally use the Tower of Babel as their template for what this looks like, but they see themselves at the top. These are your whole coiners or your multi, like, I have multiple BTC and under my possession, and therefore I get to be a oppressive intergalactic space lord, and ultimately everything below me, like people that have fewer bitcoins than me, are various levels of slaves to my empire, and this is the world as they envision it. This is good. So they see themselves as potentially being this impenetrable aristocracy in the future. And if they're right, that is what it looks like. And this has actually been the thing that I've been saying for years, is that you should hold on to your BTC, especially if you're an old coiner. If you bought your coins at $1,000 or something, and you can keep your unsplit bitcoins. And the reason is betting against people who are vicious and have a vicious and well coordinated goal, especially in coordination and collaboration with the other most vicious and powerful people in the existing economy. It's pretty silly to bet against that. And so there's actually another Kraywitzism, is to hold the Bitcoin basket. Like, you just keep your coins unsplit, and you can benefit from whatever malfeasances that are created by people who are willing to do anything to win, while at the same time, keeping your mind and your portfolio in a place that is not politicized, right? And this is the same thing. This is like, 20 years ago, if you were going to get into the green energy industry and say, hey, you know what, I think wind and solar or nuclear or whatever is the way forward, but ultimately it's going to be really hard to break the oil monopoly. So I'm just going to keep a portion of my portfolio in, like, ExxonMobil and British Petroleum and some of these other things, because ultimately the world does not get better because you were a martyr and you are now poor also. And so, but all that to say, yeah, and Bitcoin, BTC, and any of it can go to $1 million because the number's arbitrary. Like, fiat is a completely arbitrary system that is also just a lever that can be pulled by the people that control everything. And so, yeah, could BTC be $1 million a coin? Sure. Could it be $1 billion a coin? Yeah, why not? And ultimately,
who decides
yeah, go
how
ahead.
much tether gets to go in? I see they seem to put $1 billion at a time. Is that some sort of putting in a deposit?
I mean,
what's that all about?
officially, they would ask you to believe that financial institutions do not have the ability to buy Bitcoin in dollars, and therefore they have to approach Tether, make some kind of private under-the-table exchange, and then send those tethers to Huobi or OKX or Binance or whatever in order to acquire their Bitcoins. And then this is how the completely organic BTC price is discovered. In reality, we have no idea how it works. Well, actually, not no idea. You can actually look at the New York Attorney General's report on their conviction for fraud to see how it has worked in the past. Although, past performance is not necessarily a guarantee of future performance, but we do know how they have done business in the past. Actually, in their previous businesses as well. So you can look at, like, Stuart Hoagner's history of looking at all the cards on the table when he was a gambling industry insider that he also got in a lot of trouble for, and saying, oh, yeah, no, this is completely fair. But in reality, he was looking at everybody's cards and betting against his own customers. And that's how he got rich in the first place. But So anyways, yeah. So how do they actually work? They work the same way that any central bank works. This is why I call them the Tetheral Reserve. They decide what they want the next era to look like, and they set up a system whereby a certain amount of float is out there unsecured or insecured, that pushes the price up to do whatever they want to do. They take the profits, they dump on retail, and then they take the actual liquid capital to make deposits back into their bank to make their books balance. Like, this is not actually hard. This is how lots of old Wall Street companies used to do business before they were regulated. And in fact, some of them still do business that way, even while regulated. And that's what your small blockers will say. If I point out, like, well, Tether's, doing some really nasty stuff, they'll be like, well, yeah, but the New York Attorney General's office is corrupt, and so is, HSBC or whatever, who's laundering money for the drug cartels this week. But it doesn't mean that any of it is good. Like, Bitcoin was supposed to be, other. It was supposed to be one of these things where, hey, if you're going to have dollar stable coins or whatever else, like, they could be built on Bitcoin and using the UTXO set, and they could be globally auditable. And if you had a business that was actually trustworthy, you'd have no reason not to do that. But of course, you firewall your own accountability from your profits, and then you use a counterparty, and that counterparty ends up being the next Treasury Secretary, and that's the era we're about to enter here. So we're going to have a bunch of
Speaking of that,
tethered goons working in the Treasury Department now, so that'll be good.
Did you see the guy who's being the new crypto czar, and he's actually making a movie about Craig based upon the Satoshi?
Of course. Absolutely.
By the way, for people who don't know, Stuart Hogener is the chief counsel. I don't know if he still is, but he was for years the chief counsel, aka lawyer for Tether. And what Kurt was pointing out was that he used to be in the gaming industry, sports books and poker games, particularly poker. And it was found that the place that he worked, he was helping them figure out how to basically, like, look at people's hands and help them lose quicker. So, and he's guy. He also happens to be a volunteer lawyer who defended Peter McCormack in the beginning stages of the libel case, Wright versus McCormack. And he's the one who disappeared from the case once Wright's side sent all their documents to Discovery. He bowed out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then they only came back in when Peter was able to either talk to someone higher up or that's probably the beginnings of Copa, who knows, but he was then able to get some financing from anonymous sources to carry on that case. And they decided not to go try the case on pure that Craig is not Satoshi, which is what McCormack said he was going to do. They instead said, well, it didn't result in any damages, so the libel is not serious, and they ended up winning that part. But
there's a great video that Kurt actually was on an interview recently. Well, not even recently, it was like 3 years ago. Brett shared it the other day. Because the Tucker Carlson thing came out, went viral, 5 million views now with Roger Ver. And then Brett had posted that video that you did with MM Labs around the real background of the history. And you mentioned in that video about how I guess it was Bilderberg Group, the founder of Bilderberg, or the president of Bilderberg Group funded Blockstream. Was that what you said?
So yes, and not in a circuitous fashion. So anybody that wants to do a little bit of research can look up I think he's French, he might be Belgian or something, but his name is Henri de Castries, which for all you English speakers is spelled like Henry de Castries, and so you can look it up that way. But he was the CEO of AXA Insurance, which is the largest insurer in the EU and probably everywhere in the Western Hemisphere that isn't the United States. And he was also the president, not just a member of, but he was the president of the Bilderberg Group. So anybody that wants to fall down the rabbit hole on Bilderberg, they're essentially the union of rich and powerful
Nice
people.
people. They're
So
very nice people.
yeah, so picture the most trustworthy people in the world. So a room full of cutthroat CEOs and world leaders of various rapport, people that allegedly are competing with each other, or in some cases enemies, but they have a closed door meeting once a year where they discuss what the world's going to look like in the next year. And there's like literally no media, there's no coverage, there's no reporting, nobody leaks any information about it. So Bilderberg is the black box into which your CEOs, presidents, dictators, generals, military intelligence community people, whoever, all the people that all the conspiracies are about in the first place, they close doors, they shake hands or whatever they have under their human skin, and then they decide what happens next. Now, the president of that organization was Henri de Castries, and he was also the CEO of AXA Global at the time. And in that era, when he was the CEO and president of those two organizations, they became, again, not just an insignificant investor in Blockstream, but they became the lead investor of Blockstream in their opening round to the tune of, I forget the number now, but it was something like $40 million in their seed or their angel round or whatever. And everybody's like, oh, why would that matter? What are you insinuating? Is there some, what are you, a conspiracy theorist? Which, at this point, when people say, what are you, a conspiracy theorist? You'd be like, well, yeah, which means I'm going to be vindicated in a decade or so, but sure.
No, was that the same? So at that time, I don't know what time that was, but there was Gavin Andreessen was still around. I remember watching a video here recently more about Gavin Andreessen was still around, and he was like, so we finally just got some money to pay the developers here. They were at Core. We could have a salary. This is like an interview from maybe 2015 when he was still around. Is that the same people? Or
it could be. I mean, Gavin, God bless him, is too nice for anything. He's one of these people that only survives because of the kindness of stronger men. So basically, anything he would say is definitely authentic. He is a very honest and kind man, but he's not a very wise one by my measurement. But yeah, he could have been. I don't remember the exact context there, though.
Wasn't
By the way,
Gavin?
if you want to,
there was. Go on, you can say.
By the way, if you want to dust off all this 2013 and 2012 era conspiracy, which I agree with Kurt, makes perfect sense from my businessman's view of it. I believe Kurt has a really good article that outlines all of it, and he should probably include that in the comments to this thing. But that's old and dusty. Now we have
I'll do some digging.
Now we have new fun corruption to deal with, which is that David O. Sachs, who's a well-known Trumpian for the last couple years, is as tight with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel as any three friends or three musketeers that you can possibly imagine. They co-invest in each other's companies. David O. Sachs was, after Elon bought Twitter, was like a temporary CEO or COO, I believe it was one or the other, of Twitter X, while he had just first started owning it, and vice versa. They have co-investments in all kinds of major companies that you would have heard of. Sachs's venture firm has an investment in Lightning Labs, which is Lightning Network, which is, by the way, where Nostr, which is we'll call it Nostr is sort of like we have all these social networks in BSV. Well, it's Jack Dorsey's version of that using Lightning Network, and Jack Dorsey is one of the biggest financial and moral supporters of Lightning Network that there is, because that's their solution for scaling, so to speak, which is really just the same solution as using Visa, only much worse. But then when you tie all those guys in, then you realize that Howard Lutnick is, his firm Cantor Fitzgerald is the largest trader in government treasury bills and T-bonds. And one of his, if not the biggest customer, but one of his biggest customers, new customers, is Tether, because they have basically somewhere around $140 billion worth of cash that they wish to invest and earn 3, 4, 5% interest at today's rates. So they're making billions just from putting the tether that they own in their pirate's chest into T-bills. So now the U.S. government and Tether, which we just pointed out, has a lawyer whose past includes screwing people for chump change on gambling exchanges, and has a kind of a criminal history there. These are all tied in now, and unfortunately, this is the new world. And I think a big part of it, and this is not a political statement whatsoever. I could care less which side you're on. But I think the fact that the presidential candidate changed in the middle of the summer caused a bit of a funding problem for the Trump campaign. And I think they need to raise money to battle a new candidate who, with the help of Netflix founder and some other people, quickly raised $1 billion in the summertime. And if you tie all that in, very interestingly, this is right when Elon sort of got excused from his doggy coin promotional lawsuit. And what a great time to maybe make a deal. What could the deal be? I don't know. Perhaps Trump gets one of his kids on the presidential candidacy underneath the 2028 Vance, is that his name? The vice president, the incoming vice president?
Yeah, good old San Francisco JD, they call him, I think.
Yeah. And look, JD says some cool stuff. Like, I agree with a lot of points these guys make, but I always agree with campaign promises for the most part, because usually they're pretty logical and built to appease a large audience. But Vance is very much in the pocket of Peter Thiel. He's basically like Peter Thiel's lackey. So Peter very much wants the next president of the United States to be his guy, because he's probably the one that made the deal to get him to be vice president in the first place.
So now we
And the
got
fact that guys are making.
Sachs is one of Peter Thiel's guys. Elon Musk, these are PayPal guys, so they're all Peter Thiel. Is that your?
Yeah, it's the PayPal mafia runs the world at this point. It used to be BlackRock. Larry's probably struggling a little bit. I mean, he's doing well, but he was for the most part post recession. He was kind of the emperor of the world, and I think that's shifted with this second Trump campaign. I think the emperor of the world is effectively Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And Sachs mysteriously buys the rights
easily.
Sachs buys the rights to the Satoshi affair, and the Trump campaign inserts a Tether guy into the try to put him into the Secretary of the Treasury, which is insane. I would encourage everybody to start reading your South Sea Company history, because it's getting so rhymy from a period of 1711 to 1720. That it's truly shocking. I mean, I'll just give you the hint that essentially the UK was pretty much the largest power in the world by 1700. They'd already conquered, taken it away from the Spanish with the Spanish Armada and all that. And lo and behold, the new King George, made some deals with the Tories and the Whigs at the time and came into power. And it ended up that the UK government and the Bank of England and the UK government debt, the King Court's debt, ended up being financed by the South Sea Company, which, by the way, was primary business was moving slaves to South America.
No, two businesses that you can always invest in and will never go away are slaving and whaling. Just FYI.
but it's kind of ironic, right? Because you listen to Crazy Craig's on his warpath about assassination markets and North Korean nuclear bomb munitions financing. But honestly, same sort of thing, right? I mean, this is what BTC's core is really about. When I think of core, I think of slave ships and of you name it, sex trafficking, all that kind of stuff. Totally real. So I don't know, coin mixing. I mean, do you know what Greg Maxwell's expertise really is in terms of his technical expertise? It's coin mixing. If you want to read his null, I didn't even know who Null C was, but I just knew him as, this is years ago. I used to read this Null C guy. I'm like, man, is this guy really all about coin mixing? So I don't know, look up that and Tornado Cash, and I don't know. There's all kinds of good goodies to study these days.
So what are your guys' thoughts on David Sachs as the crypto czar?
Let me just throw in.
Joel.
Let me just finish what I was saying before about
Go for it.
Kurt was spot on with everything what he said, apart from Gavin never worked for Blockstream, was never offered to work for Blockstream. But yeah, Blockstream did come out with the whole, oh, now we've got money to pay for people. But I just want to make sure that Gavin Anderson wasn't thrown under the bus there.
Nice.
Yeah, I should be clear. I like Gavin Andreessen. He's just not a guy I want to follow into a battle. So that's my criticism of Gavin. Not a criticism of him as a person. He'd be welcome to sleep on my couch, or you know, I'd share a drink with him, or any in full cordiality and respect. But you know, just being straight with everybody.
We'll get a battle together, Kurt. Don't worry. We'll do it together. But yeah, Gavin would be like Gavin would be like carrying some secondhand. No, that's too harsh. Like carrying a wet towel to battle.
Sure.
Yeah. So what about this guy, this crypto czar? What do you guys think about this new guy, David Sachs?
Oh, I mean, it's more of the same. I mean, this is why, you know, people ask me why I don't vote. You know, I even had Craig criticizing me for, you know, hey, why aren't you going to vote? And you should go vote for some of this. This election's important. And I always say, like, no. You know, campaign promises are important. The ideas are important. The people are important. But elections, you know, they are fake. They are designed to ingratiate you to your captor. And there are plenty of things to like about the promises that have been made by the Trump campaign, including JD Vance stuff. And, you know, I'm a fan of a lot of the ideas of guys like RFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard or whatever else. But in reality, when the rubber hits the road and you are looking at a bureaucracy of people that is over 1 million people in this country, and you combine that with trillions of dollars of lobbyist money and people who are very, very used to earning the money that they earn, then, you know, you get exactly this. Now, the crypto industry is a fantastic example of something where the president is obviously going to be unsophisticated. He's a senior citizen, okay? Probably does business on pen and paper to this day, you know, aside from, you know, his tweeting or whatever. But ultimately, this is a man who came up in the 80s, and that's the level of sophistication when he was in his prime. Now, when it comes to disruptive technology, where is someone like him going to go? I mean, he's going to say, okay, where are the technology people? Austin, San Francisco. Like that's it if you're an American. And he's obviously going to pick Americans and say, okay, well, who are the most successful people in tech? Like, who are the people that invested in the companies that are now successful? And that's Peter Thiel, that's Reid Hoffman, that's you know, your what's his face, the other Andreessen, Mark Andreessen.
Zuckerberg is a new addition.
Sure, Zuckerberg, Dorsey, you know, whatever. Like that's who you ask if you are just completely ignorant to it, except for like the pamphlet version of what are successful tech companies. That's where you go. Unfortunately, I just named a who's who of people that are invested, like seed level investors in companies like Blockstream and Lightning Labs. Literally, Reid Hoffman, Jack Dorsey, you know, and some of these other Mark Andreessen and whatever through shell companies mostly, but that's who they are. And so when you get the power vested in these things, you know, I don't know that Trump realizes that guys like David Sachs or who's the other one, Howard Lutnick, are, you know, probably villains in this story. But he doesn't have the sophistication to. He doesn't have the ability to audit every single thing that happens in every department and every corner of the country. There's 300 million people here, and a certain number of them are corrupt, rotten businessmen. But for him, it's about the metrics. It's about, okay, well, I'm going to be here's a cool thing. My thing that I'm going to be the crypto president. Put some crypto people in there. Get some successful ones. Move on. And that's the level that a managerial, and he's a CEO by trade, and so that's going to be his managerial style. Is like, pick me 5 successful people, put them in places where they will continue to bring that success. But to him, he's not an activist. He doesn't understand the nature of the problem. Remember, even a year ago, he was a critic of things like Bitcoin fundamentally, that it's a bad idea. And so he didn't have some deep, he didn't spend the last year going down the rabbit hole on why Bitcoin is good. He picked a campaign issue that also has a lot of capital tied to it. And now we're going to get a guy like David Sachs and another guy like Howard Lutnick that are, giving each other, winks and handshakes under the table at the steak dinners that Sarah Meiklejohn and Greg Maxwell go to, and that's what's going to be in the White House. And so, for everyone that voted for Trump, that's something you consented to, and I did not. So, this is very specifically why I don't vote. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I am not going to put my name on any of it, because it always turns into this. The exciting stuff ends on election day, and the nightmare starts on inauguration day, and we'll see what happens.
See, Kevin Healy wants to,
I want to throw
jump
some,
in. Go ahead,
yeah.
Kevin.
So I think that, nobody is 100% perfect. And so when we talk in binaries, like, this person's evil and this person's not, it's really, it limits us, because the reality is that everybody is like different shades of gray, and very rarely are people 100% pure. So I think I don't know too much about the other guy, but I know with David Sachs, I watched his All In podcast quite a bit. And, there's a lot of things I watched in the early days. I watched the first of them, and then during COVID, when they were saying everybody needs to get a vaccine, otherwise they get, off public transit, I stopped following them, and I was so mad. But then I started following them again, and they actually changed their mind on that. And they, had RFK Jr. on and stuff like that. So to say that they are set specifically on one perspective and it'll never change, I think limits us. And I also think that a big part of the reason why they might be supporting the current things is because they can invest in them. Whereas with us and nChain's, really sort of this impenetrable wall, or let's just say that there's not a lot of startups that they could invest in with BSV. And if they were making money off of it, then they probably would. It's probably just as simple as they're just supporting the companies they're invested in.
No, that's fair, Kevin.
Jack?
just to clarify, I speak in very absolute terms, and I think in some ways it's a blessing, and in other ways it gets me in trouble. But when I talk about David Sachs, I don't think David Sachs is an evil person. I think he is a capitalist and an opportunist, and that both of those things are not criticisms. That is his industry, and it is his goal to make money on the momentum of whatever is new and cool. And while I don't think Lightning Network is new and cool, lots of people do, and when lots of people do, that's the way that a pure capitalist, especially a venture capitalist, is going to think. Now, you can talk about the amorality or the immorality of that, but that starts to turn very sort of left-wing activist very quickly, to be like, wow, that's and I'm just not going to go there. Were I given the opportunity to tug on David Sachs's ear for an hour, I'd very much like to talk about, hey, you know what? A lot of the premises under which things like Lightning Labs were created are false, and in fact maliciously false. And he may not know that. In fact, I would expect him also to not know that, for the same reason that Donald Trump is not aware of the nuances of the Bitcoin civil war. David Sachs probably isn't either. And he looks at the opportunity as I don't know, man. Bally Gifford and AXA and Reid Hoffman and Mark Andreessen are throwing money in the pot. Of course, I'm going to throw money in the pot with those people. And this is how Silicon Valley works. How New York works in a lot of ways too. It's the same thing with oh, hey, I heard Goldman's getting in on whatever, and then you see the people at the firm across the street. You get your JP Morgans and your Morgan Stanleys and your whoever who are like, oh, well, where'd you hear that? If that's true, we need to get in there too before it becomes news and blah, blah, blah. It's just like and again, it's about the momentum. We need to earn money on the trade. So very few people are in business for reasons of morality.
Yeah.
Elon Musk pretends to be, which is why he's so successful. He is so good at
Pretends to be, huh?
understanding.
Thought he would.
Yeah, no, Elon Musk loves you. That's something you need to know about him. But no, he's very good at understanding the memetics of the day. He understands what people value, and he takes that sort of social zeitgeist and bundles it up into his business opportunity. It's funny because it's so effective because we have this desire. We're a very communal animal. Like we socialize. It is one of the key things that differentiates us, is the sophistication of our socialization relative to every other species on Earth, is that we desire to be known and heard and loved and thought about. And are they thinking about me a lot? And do they think nice things about me when they think about? And it's like we have this like anxious mania about community and acceptance. And Elon really, really deeply understands how to monetize that. And he's done it better than maybe anybody in the history of Earth. And, and so that is what it is. But ultimately, it's capitalism. Capitalism is amoral. It's an opportunity, and it can be moral. Like there are reasons to do it well that are, completely for reasons of activism, but there are reasons to do it well just because of incentives and profit seeking too. Like I believe a truly free market system leads to morality, but it is, sometimes takes a very circuitous journey. So that's, maybe I've spoken too much.
Jack, you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, Kevin, on a basis between you and I and the people in this room, usually, absolutely believe what you're saying is correct. However, we have an expression in the submarine Navy that's called all hands lost. And this is what you say when you read off the roles of all the World War II submarines and even the nuclear submarines that have gone down. And when a submarine goes down with a zillion pounds of water weight over top of it, because you're living under the sea for 5 years, and some cook opens up the wrong, trash tube and screws up the procedure, and somebody else did something wrong on that day as well, and the submarine goes down, it's all hands lost. And so you're taught to be responsible for your actions. And there's no better way to know that than you're responsible for your actions or you die. And I think when you're at the level of a Musk, a Thiel, and a Sachs, you don't buy the rights to a movie about a guy that you completely ignore everything he says, but you're going to make a movie about him, but then you're just going to ignore the fact that he's literally told you how to solve all the problems that Elon Musk has made public about what a blockchain should be if it were to work on something like this platform, right? It needs to be fast. It needs to settle quickly. It needs to be super cheap. And I should
say, I also know for a fact that Elon has been given more than a high level pitch on BSV in specific. So he is not ignorant to, hey, here's why Doge is a really good idea. Like he understands the state of play here.
Who do you know? What do you know, Kurt?
That I cannot divulge. So, yeah.
But I would say to anyone listening to this stuff, I would say you should be questioning them, right? You should say, what is your motivation for buying rights to this movie about a guy that you won't even say his name in public, even to make a bad comment about him? Like they're using this damnatio memori sort of old school Roman top punishment for this man that they won't even mention. It's truly, I don't know what else you would use other than evil. I mean, I don't care if you agree with me, but at least say the name. Say the name.
Yeah, we do have, there are villains in this story. And that's the thing. Like, if you talk about when they're looking into it, so think about who is David Sachs going to ask when it comes time to like, hey, we really need to come up with both a technical roadmap and a policy roadmap about blockchain, who's in the portfolio, right? So then you start to get down like one level. Who do we speak to? Well, you speak to Elizabeth Stark or Adam Back or all these people, and those people, they absolutely have an axe to grind. And when they have the ear of somebody like David Sachs, who they probably talk to once a quarter at best, at the investor call or whatever, that's when they say, hey, here's the way this should work. Here's how this would work if we could get away with murder. And also, we should probably talk about this Craig problem because that's going to be that's one of our major risks here. So
are you seeing it as a spin where they can spin this Craig story by buying the rights and spin it off into like some Aussie man bad crazy person?
Well, probably it's just marketing. I mean, it's the same. It's just like any propaganda. Like, we are in the middle of a propaganda war, and we have been for a very long time. And if you want to win that propaganda war, which is something that they are, at multiple levels trying to figure out. So even the Trump administration, how do we have a smooth transition and a successful presidency? Like, well, blockchain is going to be part of that. Who are our blockchain experts? Well, your blockchain experts are going to be block streamers and Ethereum people. That's who's going to get brought in as consultants to explain the battlefield and what's at play. What are the risky things?
Don't forget
what are the
about
risky
XRP,
people?
they really know what they're doing.
Oh, sure, right.
Yeah.
Bring in what's his face? Schwartz and Garlinghouse. Yeah. Right. So, and and these people are the enemy. Those people are going to very deliberately be like, okay, there's like 5 major things we need to work on, and and one of them is Craig. Like, here's Craig, this big problem. And so yes, like that's how I imagine stuff like that ends up being turning into what it is.
And I see that, especially when you're talking about the part where, like, who do we talk to? Let's see who's in the portfolio and that kind of stuff. But I guess the point that I've been trying to make is that what if we were in the portfolio, and we could have been in the portfolio back in like years ago, and then
sure. Someone like Ryan Charles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so
he's not on our team anymore either.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but because I don't know. Yeah, I just feel like they just need to they want to have a piece of the pie, and I feel like we're extremely exclusive in the BSV space, where we don't want anybody to have a piece of the pie, not even outside people, but even in our own structures. And I think that slows us down a lot.
Yeah,
I think I do see that, but I think it's just like anything else. It's like trying to. Half of my family is Polish. Like, the family that I married into, the first generation ones, the ones that were, born after the Berlin Wall fell, like, they're still a little goofy, but the ones that were, lived in East Germany or the Soviet Union, or God forbid, great grandma who spent, 4 years in the gulag and doesn't have any fingers, like they have trust issues. And so I think, the typical BSV person has gone through, I don't want to say the gulag version of the Bitcoin civil war, but we've been through a lot, and trusting the wrong people has done us very poorly. So it's been, I think it's something that culturally we need to recalibrate, go to therapy, where necessary, exercise those demons a little bit, learn to forgive ourselves and forgive others. And yes, but Kevin's right. Like, we need to have a little bit more of an open and loving culture, but also that's risky because we have a lot of people that would love to see us disappear. So that's a tough one. I don't know how to skin that cat.
If you want to see what a mega billionaire does to treat BSV or Craig or original Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, right, look no further than BlackRock. And I am not a BlackRock fan by any means for many reasons. However, in their document introducing the ETF, they at least do it right. And they just say, hey, this guy's a risk factor. We reserve the right to do whatever we want and call whatever Bitcoin ends up being Bitcoin. And that's a path that I would have expected Coinbase guy Armstrong to have said in 2012, right? That makes sense to me. Like, I don't care who wins. whoever wins, I want to be with the winner because that's what I want to be with. That's our job as BlackRock or our job as an exchange, Coinbase. That would make sense. But what these guys are doing, and I could be wrong, maybe those two secret accounts with a lot of Bitcoin in them are, Elon and Thiel, who knows? But I would just say expect the opposite because that's what it's shaping up to be. And I would much rather them just say something like BlackRock and just say, well, we don't know what the right Bitcoin is. We're experimenting, and that would be fine. I don't think that would get them in any trouble. And we live in a society where, in 2019, you were a complete outcast if you didn't want to get your kids vaccinated. Now you got like half the nation supporting you. So, and it's still a debate, but my point is at least it's a debate. Whereas what people don't want in America is a non-debate. And I think when you make one-sided movies, which is what I would expect from this group, that's just not the way to do it.
Nice. Meta, you're up. You got your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna mention. I mean, we were kind of past that topic, but David Sachs. It was like a couple weeks after the block size, the whole drama on the block size war. He had an article on CNBC where he did an interview, and there's an interesting quote in there where he said that the biggest areas for concern in crypto, one of them was obviously regulatory, but the other was scalability. And the quote that he had said was that the number of transactions per second that either Bitcoin or Ethereum can handle is still orders of a magnitude less than what PayPal or the Visa network can do. And then he kind of goes on to explain how you need like a 250x improvement, and how that improvement requires real risk. So Kurt, if you ever did get to bend his ear for an hour, I would just ask him, how's that going?
Yeah. Well, Arthur Van Pelt will tell him BTC does 40 million TPS because Lightning Network pitch deck says so. But that'd be great. No, and honestly, I like to think of myself as while I'm quite frank in the way that I communicate, I think I'm also pretty good at threading the needle between having a difficult conversation and having a fun conversation. So I mean, I would love to. I'd love to do more consulting, especially with people in situations of decision making. So if anybody's got connections or whatever, or wants to help me get on more podcasts or whatever, I'm here to help. I'm here to answer those questions and all of that. So let's do that.
Nice. We never heard from David Case. Did you want to chime in at all? David, nice to see you up here on the stage.
Hey, I not really. Nicole just told me that I was being requested, but I didn't see it till half hour after she sent that to me. So, I mean, Casey, I'm sorry.
David, the question earlier was with sort of the parent-child transactions and end sequence and all that stuff. What were some of the numbers that you could do within a block? How many tethered, by the way, how many tethered transactions could you do in a row? Right when you guys first started versus when they upgraded it, and then what's the end goal?
Honestly, to this point, it's still really, really horrible. You cannot reliably, if you're doing just a few transactions and the network is not very busy, you can do it just fine. But as soon as the network starts getting busy and the nodes are trying to manage their mempools, well, then kind of ancestors in your chains the node just chooses to forget about them, and therefore every transaction that depends on it gets ignored. So even to this day, if you're trying to do chained mempool transactions, it's very, very hit or miss.
Was that something that could be corrected by using end sequence and a payment channel? But I realize,
well, sort of, but
I mean, very commonly talked about back then. But
yeah, so I mean, maybe, but those aren't really separate transactions. That's just kind of one transaction over and over again. So you're not filling up the mempool. I mean, really, this is all just issues with SV node. I mean, it does what it can do, but there's a lot of big holes in it. So yeah, you can do things with payment channels and updating transactions, but then you're not filling up the mempool and it's not dropping things. But there's only certain, like, you kind of really have to model what you're trying to do around that concept of a payment channel. It's
By the
not
way,
like it's not just like any transaction you can just do that. You kind of have to have
by
a
the way,
solution.
for the purposes of my dictionary, what do you call this whole topic of the sort of parent-child? It used to have a name that, like back in 2021, people would say it, and everybody would, like Bit Boss, and you guys would get up in front of the conference and say like, "Hey, we're dealing with this," for lack of a
I
better
think it's
word.
the acronym is CPFP, Child Pays for Parent.
Well, but that's
Um,
actually even more complicated. That's a different thing. So
Yeah.
child pays for parent essentially means your first transaction doesn't actually have enough Bitcoin in it left for a transaction fee. And so that's even kind of a different state of that transaction is like in a limbo until a child comes along to pay enough transaction fee for both transactions. So that's
Yeah,
actually a far more
that's not.
complicated.
That is a thing, yeah. But I don't remember you guys calling it that. It was more
No, we
something
weren't
like
doing anything with
chain.
child pays for parent.
It was sort of like chain transactions, or you guys sort of had a quick way of referencing it. What was that? Do you
Yeah, I
remember?
mean that's certainly a term. There actually is. I'm trying to think. It's been several years now, but there's a term